In the dining room, Nani asks Riley if he wants her to make him some tea, but Riley insists that he didn't bring someone of her skill to his home to make him tea. She then asks in a rude manner why she's in a maid costume, and Riley tells her to fix her tone, because the mansion isn't like the South Solia slums she is from. He then calls her attention to one of the Grand Mage's items and asks her if she can teach him how to use it. Although Nani can figure out how much mana a magic item possesses, she can't teach Riley how to use it. Then, Riley asks if she had ever seen the Grand Mage use any of the items, but she said she hadn't seen the Grand Mage with anything aside from his dumb cape. Afterward, Riley put down the items and told her to hold on to them temporarily, as he knows someone who might know how to use them. Nani wonders who Riley was talking about, and she proceeds to ask why he wants to learn magic from her, and not a proper mage. She claims she is a six-circle mage due to experiments, and learning from a real mage will be more effective. Riley agreed with her in a smug manner, which made Nani much more curious about why he brought her to his home. Riley tells her that she reminded him of who he used to be, someone that was most dependent on other people's approval. However, a person shouldn't be defined by their usefulness. A person should follow his heart in the direction it leads to, and not overthink anything. This statement resonates so much with Nani that she lets out some tears, which is then coupled with a smile. On the contrary, Riley tells her the previous mage he was talking about refused to teach him magic. The mage claimed that he would become a demon king if he were both skilled in swordsmanship and magic. His complaints made Nani regret ever getting impressed by Riley in the first place. The next day, Riley and Nani are in a carriage, and he asks her the meaning of a circle. Nani explains that it's a ring or a loop, and the number of circles around one's heart determines how powerful they are. She continues by producing light magic on her palm, and educates Riley about it. She then brags about being able to use all kinds of magical attributes, and that's probably why she survived those experiments. After her bragging, Riley decides to shock her by telling her they're only 5 minutes away from the mage who refused to teach him magic. Nani starts to wonder how powerful the mage is, but even though she won't live much longer, she's still a six-circle mage and doesn't have to worry. They arrive at their destination and hop off the carriage. Nani is eager to meet this powerful mage after all the hype from Riley, and soon, Riley calls the mage out by the name Endal. A red-haired man comes out of the closet and exchanges pleasantries with Riley. Nani is so spooked, and she wonders why someone like him is in a less befitting environment. Endal asks Riley about his maid, and Riley proceeds to tell him about his trip to Solia and the dumb prophecy St. Frisia told him while visiting the temple. Riley tells Endal that he was asked to defeat him. At this point, Nani was still wondering why a dragon like Endal was there with them. Endal finds it funny, and he starts to laugh very hard as he thought that Riley was joking, but Nani is very anxious and uncomfortable. Riley continued by saying he was surprised, and Endal asked if the temple people had finally gone mad. Endal teased Riley by calling him a dragon slayer, and asked how he can help him fulfill the prophecy. The name gave Riley the ick, and he made Endal promise never to call him that again. However, Endal expressed his disappointment, as he claimed he knew the temple would make up something to drag him out, even after living quietly all these years. Riley then asks if there were other dragons in Solia, but Endal disagrees, pointing out that it's been 3,000 years since he last saw a dragon aside himself. He then offers Nani a non-alcoholic beverage that won't keep her from waiting on her master. Riley then asks him if he had plans of going amok in Solia, but Endal refuted it, claiming he won't gain anything from such pain. Suddenly, Endal confronts Nani with his eyes full of flames and warns her not to go blabbing about his existence. Endal's eyes up close were a marvel to Nani, since she had only seen dragon's eyes in books. Riley tells Endal to quit scaring the poor girl, and tell them how to use the Grand Mage's items they brought. In response to that, Endal makes a joke about taverns being a place people come in to eat and drink, not bring magical items for diagnosis. Notwithstanding, he takes the items from Riley and asks how much he's willing to pay for the consultation. Riley refuses to pay him a dime, and he calls Riley a cheap jerk. As he analyzed the items, Nani is surprised he could access them all at the same time. Within a short time, Endal accessed the items and started to explain their use. The cape allows its wearer's magic to avoid the effects of weather and season, while the bracelet is a storage item. He shows them a demonstration and tells them the storage at that point is empty. However, if the bracelet straps get ripped, all items stored in it will be lost. Nani asks Endal how he was able to access a 7-circle item with such ease, with which he brags about being a dragon, after all. Endal then tells her to try on a ring, and after wearing it, she feels a rush of mana. Endal then explains that the ring allows her to absorb nearby mana automatically. Sadly, Riley says he didn't feel anything when he wore it, and Endal says it's because he's a monster. Nani is confused by this statement, but Riley feels he doesn't need to explain anything to her. Riley then gives her all the items since they're of no use to him. Riley asks Endal if he had a mana gauging stone, because he wants to measure Nani's mana. Endal then moved closer to Nani and sniffed her, after which he claimed that she's odd. Riley further explains that her spells are usually purplish-black, which is strange. Endal finds her interesting, but wonders if Riley is aware she's almost out of time. Riley then proposed to have his mana also measured, and Endal began to scold him, asking why he wants to learn magic so much. To their surprise, Riley replies that it sucks having to climb up trees just to get apples. Outside the tavern, Riley is putting his hand on the mana gauging stone. Apparently, they've been there for a while, and nothing has changed. Riley asks if the stone is defective, and Endal gets pissed at his question. Nani then explains that Riley's attribute is related to time, and soon the stone falls apart. Endal further explains that time magic can't be affected by any other type of magic, and if he tries to make a fireball, it will look like flames from a matchstick. Riley becomes devastated by this, because his dreams of using magic have been crushed. However, Nani tells him that even though there are no spells to reverse time, spells to speed up time and ripen apples faster exists. This will make the apples fall quicker, and he can eat them. Sadly, her effort to cheer her master up failed, and Riley tasked her with the job of picking up the apples. Back in the mansion, Riley continues to vent out his frustration about his lame magic attribute. Nani, on the other hand, assures him that he wouldn't need to use powerful magic anymore, now that the Grand Mage is dead. Then, Riley's brothers arrive at the dining table and ask about his whereabouts all day. Riley tells them about his trip to IFA village, and how he was escorted by his maid, Nani. After the interrogation, Lady Iris comes in and tells Riley about the visitor they received while he was out. Just then, Lebezla comes out and greets them, but Riley wonders if he's there to see his mom. Lebezla also bows to Nani, and this act shocks Ryan and Lloyd. Just then, Nani leaves to get their meals, and the brothers ask Lebezla why he was being polite to a maid. Lebezla explains to them that Nani is a 6-circle mage. She, as well as Riley, helped them greatly in subduing Grand Mage Astroa in Lower Solia. This news comes as a surprise to Ryan and Lloyd, and they wonder why she's now a maid in their home. Meanwhile, Riley gets an odd feeling that Lebezla is shady, and he's hiding something from them all. Judging from his past experience, kind people like Lebezla always turn out to be villains, and there must be a reason for him to have suddenly shown up in the mansion. Riley tries to call Nani, but he slips up and calls her informally. He quickly corrected himself and called her formally, but he noticed a grin on Lebezla's face. With this, Riley concludes that Lebezla definitely has something up his sleeve. The next day, Lebezla is about to leave the mansion, and he gives Nani a gift box. Iris tells him to come visit them again, but Riley waves at him nonchalantly. Lebezla makes a sassy comment about his rudeness, and mentions how much he enjoyed their conversation during dinner. Finally, he bowed to everyone, hopped in the carriage, and left. After his departure, Riley tells Nani that he can see through Lebezla's act, and him coming to check on his mom's illness was just an excuse. Nani wonders why Riley was suddenly a detective, and she asks if his suspicions are related to St. Frisia's last conversation with them. Riley affirms it and claims that the gift she's holding is more or less a bribe. She asks if he's really going to follow Frisia's revelation, but he refutes it, claiming there's no reason for him to go through all the stress. He then throws a little jab at the saint, but discovers she's different from the one in his past life. Finally, he decides that his life will be trouble-free from there on out, but Nani says he might jinx it by saying it out loud. Later in the day, Riley and Nani are in his father's office, waiting to be scolded. Count Epheleta questions Riley on why he has brought a sixth circle mage into his home. He also asks Nani why a mage such as herself would choose to become a servant instead of living a life of luxury and glamour. Strangely, Nani insists that she's enjoying the honest life she's experiencing in the mansion, and she feels she has found something she lost during her time in the magic tower. The Count then asks her what she thinks of Riley, and she gets flustered, as well as Riley. She finally finds her feats, and tells the Count that Riley is a good person, which the Count also agreed with. However, Riley refuses to be called a good person, and asks why the room is suddenly so warm and fuzzy. Nani concludes that she wants to live in the present, and being a sixth circle mage is her past. Deep down, Nani thinks that she might not live much longer, and now she's going to spend the rest of the little time she has left as if nothing is wrong. The Count also asks if she's comfortable, and she replies by saying everyone has been very kind to her. The Count then insists she continues to assist Riley, and she accepts. Riley finally speaks up, and asks his father if he could go to Rainfield for the summer. Meanwhile, Ryan and Lloyd are still distraught, and can't believe Riley's new maid is a sixth circle mage. Lloyd decides that they have to make their own achievements to ensure their line inherits their father's legacy. Ryan, on the other hand, seems unbothered as he flipped through his newspaper. Then, he comes across a post about a wanted mage whose last location was at Rainfield. Upon seeing this, Lloyd suggests going to hunt down this dark mage in Rainfield, and Ryan agrees with an evil smirk. Ryan thinks to himself that Riley always goes to Rainfield for the summer, and if he never returns, no one will suspect anything. While the brothers concocted their evil plan, the Count gives Riley permission to spend his summer at Rainfield, and Riley leaps for joy. Riley prepares to leave for Rainfield, and Ian starts to trouble him for how long he'd be there. He says it will be for about 3 weeks, and assures Ian he'll be fine. He proceeds to the carriage, and sees Nani bidding farewell to Lady Iris. Lady Iris doesn't seem to be worried about Nani, because Riley will protect her. Just then, Lady Iris gives Nani a gift, and tells her to open it later, because it is something she might like. As a token of her gratitude, Nani promised to serve Riley well, and prove herself worthy of Lady Iris's gift. Finally, they depart into a blissful journey to Rainfield. However, they branch at Endal's tavern to trouble him some more. Riley asks Endal to teleport them to Rainfield, but Endal is really getting tired of Riley pestering him every now and then. He expressed his frustration by throwing a fireball at Riley, but he dodged it, and it burned a tree instead. Endal agrees to help Riley in exchange for Nani, but Riley tells him she's off limits. Endal accepts to teleport them someone close to Rainfield, because they will get caught if he drops them straight into Rainfield. Just before doing that, he asks Riley if he's aware of Nani's little time left, and Riley says he's aware. While they discussed Nani, she was wondering what might be taking them so long. She then decides to open the gift Lady Iris gave her earlier, and to her surprise, the gift is a mask. The gesture almost brought her to tears, but she started to cough up blood instead. It reminded her of St. Frisia, telling her how short her time left was, but she decided to shake it off because she's now in a happier place. Soon, Riley tells her to join him because Endal is ready to teleport them. He then teased the dragon about teleporting them back, but Endal warned him not to push his luck. Just then, Endal teleports them away, and is finally free from the troublemakers. However, Riley and Nani get teleported to a dangerous zone filled with giant, ugly creatures with sharp teeth. Nani recognizes them as ogres, and Riley blames Endal for dropping them in a place like that. The ogre cracks up a large stick to prove he's the boss of the swamp, but Riley isn't buying into the act. Nani then offers to take care of it, but Riley tells her to sit this one out since it's just a weak, lousy ogre. He then asks her to take cover while he whipped up his sword. The ogre tries to attack him with the large stick, but Riley just walks on it and farms aura like a champ. It gets pissed off and throws multiple attacks at Riley, but he dodges them like light work, smiling in the process. He then gets serious and slices up the ogre like barbecue. Riley complains about having to take another bath and blames Endal for sending them there on purpose. Then, Nani rushes over and attempts to cleanse him using a purification spell, but she accidentally splashes mud on him instead. She tries to apologize, but Riley wasn't having, as he continued to chew her up. Their bickering gets interrupted by the ogre, who has now risen from the dead and is demanding revenge. Nani throws herself in and offers to finish off the ogre. She then uses an erasure spell to get rid of the raging monster. Meanwhile, a strange girl appears to be spying on them. Afterwards, they start wandering the forest, trying to figure out where they are on the map. However, Nani tells Riley that her detection spell is sensing a presence behind them, with which Riley suggests they go check it out. Sadly, they get ambushed by their stalker, and she brings along some friends. Riley gets frustrated since he hasn't been welcomed anywhere with such rudeness. The strange girl tells him to cut the act because she saw everything that happened earlier. She accuses Nani of using dark magic to get rid of the ogre, but all her words were news to Nani and Riley. She further explains that her purification spell didn't purify anything. It only left black filth on her companion. At this point, Riley is getting frustrated and wonders when it's all going to end, and he can enjoy his summer vacation in peace. Riley asks the strange girl about the dark mage, but she shuts him up, saying she knows the two of them work together. Riley gets angry and tells her to stop pointing her arrow at him. This time, he exudes a red aura around him, and this scares the strange girl and the rest of her crew. However, Riley doesn't resolve to violence, and he calmly asks why they've been ambushed and questioned about something they know nothing about. The strange girl's crew were still in shock about what happened earlier. One of them even said it felt like a heavy weight was bearing down on him. Riley asks them to get to explaining, and tells them that she saw Nani use dark magic, and that makes her a dark mage. However, Nani disagrees with that stereotype, and Riley defends her, saying she was born with those powers. Nani tries to remind him of the reason, which were the experiments, but Riley doesn't care. He proceeds to ask why the bandits think Nani is the dark mage they're looking for, and warns the strange girl to think before speaking. Riley then goes ahead to swear on his family name that Nani isn't their suspect, and hearing the name Epheleta spooked them even more. They start wondering why a noble is in a forest. Riley takes the opportunity to remind them of his nobility and the punishment that comes with impugning on his name. He then proceeds to tell him he's ready to do like a dark mage would, and wipe them out if they continue to accuse Nani of being a dark mage. Luckily for the bandit, Nani steps in and pleads that Riley gives them a chance to respond, but after stepping out the shadow, they notice her face. While they wondered why her face was strange, Nani told them to listen to what she had to say. Nani explained her whole story to the bandits, and the strange girl started to wail on her behalf. The bandits also apologized to Nani and asked for her forgiveness. Nani accepts their apology, but Riley points out that he liked them better when they were trying to hurt them. Their emotional blubbering reminded him of Ian and his childish ways. Although Riley is still surprised a sob story was enough to change the bandits' minds, he asks them what ended their suspicion. One of them tells him that their leader's intuition has never let them down, and one might say she has a special gift. Riley then asks them to tell him about the dark mage in Rainfield. Apparently, he's a dangerous magic-wielding mage, and even the strange girl is one of his victims. According to his wanted poster, the dark mage's distinctive features are dark magic and necromancy, meaning he can control the dead. The strange girl also points out that her father suffered at the hands of the dark mage, but before she could say anything further, they heard large footsteps approaching them. It turns out to be the ogre creeping behind Riley. However, Riley cuts the ogre down in a flash, and the bandits were shocked to see his true strength. Meanwhile, the ogre's fall was quickly noticed by the dark mage, and he gets visibly frustrated. Later in the evening, Riley and Nani find their way out of the forest through the help of the strange girl, who turns out to be a big fan of Ian, the mercenary hero. Afterward, she gives Riley a piece of paper and tells him to contact her for a meal while he's still in Rainfield. Riley gladly accepts and bids her farewell. Finally, the two travelers made it into town, and Riley couldn't hide his love for the fresh air and also the start of his vacation. Riley couldn't hide his excitement anymore, and he asks Nani what she would like them to do first. She gets surprised by his question, but later suggests going for a nice bowl of hot fish soup. However, Riley disregards her suggestion and pretends she mentioned scallion pancakes and rice wine instead. He then rushes her into a restaurant to try the town's rainy day special. In the restaurant, the sight of the scallion pancakes brought disgust to Nani's face, saying the dish looks like puke. Her comment sends chills in the room, and Riley demands she apologizes to the scallion pancake lovers of the world. Nani wasn't in the mood for jokes, but she decided to try the dish. Surprisingly, she finds it delicious, and Riley makes the "I told you so" face. He also digs in and basks in the delicious taste of the food. He slips up and makes a comment about how much he missed enjoying the dish in the old days, but when Nani asked what he meant, he quickly brushed it off. They then raise a toast, but Nani is adamant about not drinking alcohol because Lady Iris warned them not to. However, with more persuasion from Riley, she drank the wine and loved it so much that she gulped down every single drop. While eating, Riley noticed someone with bad table manners chewing loudly beside them and ruining the ambiance. The person turns out to be the dark mage, but Riley doesn't know this. He proceeds to leave the restaurant and hopes never to see the person again. After munching all the food to his satisfaction, the waiter approached the dark mage for payment. Suddenly, he attacks the waiter and kills him. Meanwhile, Riley and Nani take a walk around town in the rain, and Nani still can't get over how good the rice wine tasted. Riley also convinced her to keep their alcoholic exploits away from his mother's. Soon, the rainfall becomes stronger, and Riley tells her to remind him to get a raincoat and an umbrella for later, and Nani slips up by saying she doesn't mind sharing an umbrella with him. At first, she didn't know she said it out loud, but upon realization, she started to wonder why she said something like that. She then pulled herself together and reminded herself that she would be dead by winter. In the Temple of Solia, Libesla gets informed that Riley is currently on a vacation in Rainfield. The news makes him anxious, and he wonders why Riley had gone to Rainfield of all places. He gets worried that Riley might run into the Dark Mage, who apparently has been gathering lieutenants for their evil plan. He then decides to head to Rainfield, and orders his underling to make the necessary preparations in order. Just then, Frisia walks in and asks Libesla about his decision to meet with Riley in Rainfield. She warns him about not meddling in matters involving Riley, but Libesla just wouldn't listen. He claims that Riley being the one of the prophecy gives him more reason to meet with him. His response gets Frisia thinking about what evil plan Libesla might be up to. She then gives him a final warning to stay away from Riley before walking away. While walking, she wonders the meaning behind the revelation shown to her about Libesla. In Rainfield, Riley and Nani visit the library. Nani finds it amazing that the books in the library are in remarkable condition despite the town's humidity. Riley responds by saying that the preservation magic used in Rainfield is very much advanced, and all they have to do is enjoy the good things the town has to offer. He suggests that they read to the sound of the rain, but Nani doesn't seem like a bookworm. Riley asks her to pick out some books and meet him in the central reading area, but she tries to wiggle out of it by claiming she's been charged with his protection. However, her antics don't work, and Riley assures her that he doesn't need protecting. They both went to separate areas of the library, and while Nani contemplated on a book to read, she ran into a familiar face. It turns out to be the strange girl from the forest, Nara Basilisk. Surprised to see an old friend, Nani asks why she's in a library, and she says she's in search of books about dark mages. Nara proceeds to check out the books Nani picked, but they turn out to be mostly about drinking. Nara then teases her for being drunk, and Nani tries to defend herself. Afterward, Nara offered to buy them a meal, but they suddenly heard a scream. They get freaked out and wonder what is going on, but just then, they hear another person screaming. Nara gets anxious about Riley and asks Nani about his whereabouts. She informs Nara about their initial plan of meeting in the central reading area, and Nara offers to take her there. They quickly rush to the place, but just before they get there, they see a pile of bodies along the way. Nara and Nani are both shocked, and they wonder who is behind the atrocity. Nara senses residual magic in the area, and tells Nani about it. Nani becomes overwhelmed, and wonders why she wasn't able to sense anything. She concludes that the culprit must be a force to be reckoned with, and then she asks Nara to picture Riley. Mara isn't sure why, but she does it anyway, and using her eye radar, Nani figures out Riley's location, which is on the second floor. Just then, Nara recognizes the dark marks on the corpses, and to make matters worse, the corpses start to move. Intuitively, Nara realizes that the dark mage they've been looking for is currently in the library. Nara informs Nani about the dark mage's presence, and Nani suggests they meet with Riley and get to safety. While looking at the dark mage's puppets, Nara decides to evacuate those in harm's way, because it is what her father, as well as Ian, would do. She tells Nani to go look for Riley, and she will join up with them as soon as she can. Afterward, Nani finds Riley reading, and he's surprised to see her all stressed and panting. She tells him about the abrupt situation downstairs and the presence of the dark mage. She reminds him about the ogre coming back to life and tells him the same situation is happening in the library. Riley looks up and sees the reanimated corpses coming toward him, and he wonders if he's in some kind of zombie apocalypse movie. He whacks one in the head and scolds Nani for running over to him for such a measly matter. Downstairs, Nara has managed to take care of the zombies, and she decides to head for the dark mage. She remembers the incident of how she lost her dad due to the dark mage going on a rampage. She clenches her fists tightly and claims it's finally time to avenge her father. However, her moment gets ruined by some fellow complaining about there being too many books in a library. She recognizes the voice, and lo, it turns out to be a dark mage. The dark mage was getting frustrated with his puppets for being too stupid, but one of them handed him a book. With that book, the dark mage claims he'll be able to add acid to the rain in the skies of Rainfield. Mara overheard this and wondered why he would do such a thing, but before she could confront him, he vanished. Outside the library, Riley is pissed at Nani for ruining his leisure time with an insignificant matter. He claims he's on a holiday, and he's not interested in hunting a dark mage and whatever comes with him. However, Nani could see through him, and she wonders who the people on his mind are. Riley remembers the time in his past life when he got blamed for everyone's misfortune, and they claim they were doing fine before he appeared. This explains his nonchalant attitude toward what is currently happening, and why he doesn't want to get involved in a battle that isn't his. Suddenly, he gets called by Nara, and she approaches him. He remembers her, and she tells him about the dark mage's plan to use magic to seed acid into Rainfield's clouds. She claims he also wants to raise an army of the dead just to fulfill some sick dream of his. With tears in her eyes, Nara pleads with Riley to help her defeat the dark mage, because no matter how much he tries to hide it, she knows how strong he truly is. Nara further explains that the dark mage will turn everyone into his mindless puppets if he succeeds with his acid rain plan. Even though the matter seems concerning, Riley claims that he's in Rainfield for vacation and can't help her. Nara tries to guilt-trip him by telling him about her father's death, but Riley wouldn't budge. He carried on with his vacation plans, but deep down, he was filled with worry and self-doubt. Meanwhile, Nara and her crew continued their search for the necromancer and even handed off his wanted posters to onlookers. Finally, their hard work paid off, and Nara found the dark mage. She confronts him, but he's completely oblivious as to who she might be. Nara promises to cut his throat before he can complete the acid rain, but the dark mage finds her declaration amusing. Then, he notices her eyes, and remembers how her folks set themselves on fire, just to get away from his reanimation spell. He then proceeds to mock her, and asks her if she's also going to set herself on fire just like her folks. Nara gets angry and lunges at him, but he uses dark magic to bring out a corpse from the ground, causing the light bulbs in the area to go out. The corpse turns out to be Nara's father, and after making eye contact with him, Nara freezes. The dark mage mocks their father-daughter reunion, but Nara declares to end his life, if that's the last thing she'll ever do. The dark mage pretends to be terrified of her threats, but she attacks him. He tanks her attack with one of his puppets, and condemns her for being ungrateful for bringing back her father. The dark mage takes out the lights in the area and sends them into the sky, which in turn creates fireworks. Meanwhile, the people in the town square, including Riley and Nani, see the fireworks and they cheer. Nani takes the opportunity to ask Riley if he is having fun, because she's not. She expected more from their vacation, but it turns out her expectations might have been too high. Riley smirks at her because he's well aware of the drop in her mood. At the other end, the fight between Nara and the dark mage intensifies, and he marvels at the sight of her skills. He then decides to increase the numbers of undead to attack Nara, but she wouldn't give up. She lunges her spear at the dark mage, but her father's reanimated corpse jumps right in front of the spear. The dark mage lets out an evil smirk as Nara calls for father. After the act, the dark mage mocks Nara for attacking her father with a spear just for the sake of revenge, but Nara tells him to shut his trap hole. Meanwhile, one of her underlings tells her to stay strong and remember that the puppet isn't her father anymore. The dark mage quickly takes notice of Nara's companions and sends his puppets to surround them. They get overwhelmed by the undead and start screaming at Nara to fall back. Sadly, Nara doesn't listen, and she continues to attack the dark mage. She stabs her father with her spear, and his corpse vanishes. Just then, the dark mage swirls up into the sky with his dark magic, and starts to laugh hysterically. He then tells them he's trying to give humanity eternal life, because they are all so lacking, and at long last, he's finally ready to fulfill his dream. He puts his hands up and starts to count down from 3, ignoring the plea from Nara, telling him to stop. Suddenly, lightning strikes through the sky, and the rain stops for a split second. Nara and her companions look up, only to see that the raindrops have stopped falling and have also frozen in one place. Just then, Riley swoops in from above and catches the dark mage off guard with a sword attack. People in town were oblivious to what was going on, but all they saw was how beautiful their environment was. The raindrops start to move back up, and the people become even more amazed. On the other hand, Riley commends Nani for a job well done on the raindrops, but the dark mage managed to evade his earlier attack. The dark mage asks Riley who he is, and why he's jumping around swinging his sword about, but Riley replies that he's no one of consequence. Nara wonders why Riley is suddenly fighting the mage, and if he's also behind the raindrop stunt. Riley teases the dark mage about how sad he must be, now that his plans have been ruined. The dark mage then crashes out and asks Riley why he has chosen to ruin his dream, but Riley tells him it's his fault for trying to ruin his perfectly planned vacation. Riley then gives Nani a signal for their surprise attack. Nani sends the raindrops back into the ground, and Nara quickly realizes Nini is behind the rain stunt. The dark mage gets pissed off and calls them ungrateful wretches, with which Riley insists that he has no reason to be grateful to someone actively trying to ruin his vacation. The dark mage then sends more undead toward Riley and claims they'll keep coming back, no matter how much he cuts them down. Just then, Riley cuts through the dark mage's puppets and calls them a cheap party trick. The Dark Mage gets even more annoyed and sends multitudes at Riley. Although the Dark Mage's undead army contains orcs, goblins, and mages, Riley isn't fazed by any of them since he believes they're nothing but glorified puppets. He slashes through the creatures like cutting a cake and having fun in the process. Soon, Riley decides to show off his own party trick and unleashes an overwhelming aura like he did to Nara and her companions in the forest. The aura causes everyone, including the Dark Mage, to freeze in place. Now that the Dark Mage was open, Riley slashed him with his sword, and the Dark Mage fell to the ground. While he falls to the ground, his reanimated corpses start to vanish, and just then, Nara sees her father's corpse vanish. She then wished that her father finally rests in peace. Riley, on the contrary, wonders how Nani is holding up and decides to go to her. Nani is at the top of a building, using all her mana to control the raindrops and use a purification spell to dissolve the acid drops. At some point, she starts to cough up blood, but she continues to focus on her job. After a while, she managed to dispel the poisonous clouds and turn them into fireworks. Through her hard work and focus, Nani managed to save everyone in Rainfield. The next day, Riley and Nani read the newspaper during their tea party. According to the newspaper, the official report was that the Dark Mage eluded capture, and Riley figured out that Nara must have kept quiet on the matter. However, Nani wished he had been praised for his exploits, and hoped he could feel the happiness she felt when she saved everyone from the acid rain. Riley wonders if her behavior is because she's been living with Ian, and then proceeds to call her closer. Nani comes closer to him, and wonders what's up with him. Surprisingly, he taps her on the shoulder, and commends her for a job well done. Nani gets touched by his gesture, and starts apologizing for enjoying the vacation more than he did. Then, Riley suggests they end the vacation and head home, because they must be worried about them. However, Nani starts to sweat, and tells Riley they haven't done something they should have done a while back. Riley wonders what it is, but Nani draws him closer, and tells him that they haven't reached out to their home ever since they arrived at Rainfield. This sends chills down Riley's spine, since he promised to Skype his mom through the mirror during his time in Rainfield. He immediately orders Nani to set up the mirror and put a call through to his mom right away. The call goes through, and they all start to smile awkwardly at one another. Just then, Lady Iris asks them why it took so long for them to call, after all the promises they made before leaving. Riley tells her that he can explain the reason, but he proceeds to freeze in order to make it look like their Skype is broken. However, Nani ruins Riley's plan by telling Lady Iris that the mirror isn't faulty. Riley scolds her for being a dunce, even after reading so many books in the library. Lady Iris then butts in and asks if everything is fine with them, with which they reply that it is. Out of nowhere, Ian appears in the call, and as usual, screams for his young master. Feeling remorseful, Riley apologizes for not sending a word to them, and Lady Iris makes him promise that it won't happen again. Before closing the portal, Sarah comes up to it, and to the delight of Riley, she gives Nani an earful. She reminded Nani of her responsibilities, and made her promise to do her job well. Nani then apologizes to her, and they both catch up with small talk. Meanwhile, Libesla is in an unknown location, and he is grabbing the remnants of the Dark Mage's magic. He claims that he warned him about needless posturing, and how everything they do should be in service of their glorious dream. He then says that they must now proceed with deliberate caution. In Rainfield, Nara meets up with Riley and begins to brief him about her existence. However, Nini is in distress, and she shivers like she caught a cold. Riley asks if she's all right, but she says she's fine. He then proceeds to ask Nara about the Basilisk tribe and their unique ability of being able to see the nature of a person's energy. Nara explains that people's energy can be thought of as magical properties, and she is able to differentiate people by the color of their energy. There's red, blue, white, and some even exude purple energy. However, those people are few, and one of them is the dark mage they defeated earlier. Just then, they get stopped by a bald guy who seems to be acquainted with Nara. She called him Kaval, and she asked him where he was headed. Kaval says he's on his way to meet an old friend, and Nara asks if the old friend is the priest she heard about. Kaval brushes it off and tries to look into the carriage. He is met with Riley's glaring eyes, and he gets spooked right away. Kaval recognizes the Epheleta symbol on the carriage, but when he asks Nara about it, she tells him to let it go. He accepts her request, and they both go their separate ways. Nara then tells Riley that Kaval is also a person with purple energy, and Riley thinks that they might be a common breed, after all. However, Nara corrects him by saying she has only met 4 people with purple energy. Some beggar in a nameless village, the strange priest she saw in Rainfield, Kaval, and the dark mage. Those people are the ones she knows about, and there may be others lurking out there somewhere in the world. Kaval meets up with Libesla, and they both fish for what's left of the dark mage. Kaval blames the dark mage for taking it a step too far in fulfilling their dream, and asks Libesla what they're going to do now that their left hand is gone. Libesla tries to calm him down, but Kaval wouldn't let up. He asks Libesla about the other 2 involved in the plan, and Libesla tells him they are off doing things that require much intelligence. Kaval also asks about the right hand, and Libesla doesn't know his whereabouts. Libesla informs Kaval that they now have to fix the left hand, and wait until it's the right time to realize their dream. Meanwhile, Riley arrives at the manor, and it is home, sweet home for Nani. Immediately, Ian rushes out and screams for his beloved young master. He starts to weep and tells Riley how worried he has been. Nara, on the other hand, is surprised to see her mercenary hero crying like a girl. Riley then used the opportunity to introduce them both, and Ian quickly noticed she was a basilisk. Nani quickly bows to pay respect to Ian and expresses how honored she is to meet him. The two catch up, and Nara tells him about what happened to the basilisk tribe. Hearing how her father and the rest of her people fell at the hands of the dark mage made Ian's heart ache. He commended her for staying strong, and also advised her to do her name proud. His kind words weakened Nara's heart, and she fell into tears. After a while, Riley gets informed that his father had left 2 days prior, when he received a message from Solia Castle. Ian explains that there was an attack on the Solian border, and Lord Epheleta went alone, leaving Riley brother to man the manor. Riley asks about his mother, but they hear a loud crash before Ian can answer. Riley looks at the scene and sees Nani looking gaunt, shaking, and holding her hand. He quickly holds on to her, but she claims she's fine and offers to clean up the mess she made. Riley says it's not important, but Nani starts to apologize to him and begs him not to cast her aside. After saying that, she collapsed. While she was unconscious, Endal and Riley discuss her condition and how much time she has left to live. Riley gets visibly upset because she refused to ask for some rest when she knew she was sick. He claims that she's one of those people that foolishly try to work through pain and sickness. This reminded Riley of how he used to have the mindset of saving the world and living up to everyone's expectations. He sacrificed everything he had for that, but at the end, it broke him. Endal comments that humans are very interesting creatures, and maybe it's because of their short lifespan. Riley couldn't agree more with him, and told him that Nani overused her magic at Rainfield, and it ended up reducing the little time she had left. Riley then reminds Endal of how he wanted Nani as part of a deal, making Endal excited for a bit. However, Riley shuts down his excitement and pleads with him to save Nani's life. Later, Nani wakes up and sees Riley through a window. He is sitting under a tree, and she gets worried that he might get sick if he falls asleep like that, due to the cold weather. Suddenly, she starts to sink, moving into the modern world, and walking through a crowd. Nani gets scared, and all she does is scream for her young master. While Nani got the vision, Riley felt a jolt in his body and screamed. Nani rushes out to meet him, but she is stopped by Ian, who advises her to take a break for the day. However, she tried to pretend like she was fine, but Ian saw her hands shaking and called her bluff. He tells her to go inside while he approaches Riley. He asks if Riley is fine, and he replies that he had a nightmare. Just then, Nani bleeds out again, and her vision gets blurry. As a result of that, she collapsed while Ian and Riley rushed to her. Later, Nani wakes up and sees Riley's brothers making a fuss in the room she lays. Suddenly, she starts to cough up blood, and the sight of it spooks Leod. He tries to get help for her, but Ryan drags him back and tells him that they should leave her be. Leod is surprised by this and reminds Ryan that their father would never leave anyone in need of help. Sadly, he gets smacked in the face by Ryan, who tells him to get a grip. He says that she's dying anyway, and they should let nature run its course. Luckily, Endal bursts through the door, dressed as a doctor, and rains on Ryan's parade. He asks the Shady Boys what they were doing standing, and they ask who he is. He ignores them, and checks up on Nani, diagnosing that she's in rough shape. Ryan asks him again, but Endal ignores him for the second time, and mumbles some jargons. Angrily, Ryan draws his sword, and places it on Endal's torso, and just then, Endal tells them his name. The brothers mock his name, calling it stupid, but he says he only uses it when he takes up his human form. They then ask for his business in the room, and he tells them he is a doctor. They find it hard to believe, but Riley comes in for the rescue, and confirms that Endal is a skilled physician he met in Rainfield. They both cook up a ruse to back up their story, just to get the brothers off their back. Then, Ryan scolds Endal for talking down on them, but Endal tells him to be grateful he didn't deal with him for drawing his sword earlier. Infuriated by that comment, Ryan attacks Endal with his sword, but Endal fills the room with his dragon aura, leaving Ryan unable to move. Suddenly, Nani wakes up screaming, and Riley rushes to her. She asks how long she has been asleep, which has been about 6 hours straight. She then suggests she resumes her duties right away because she's been away for too long. However, Riley breaks it to her that she can no longer stay with them. Later in the day, the servants in the building are all sad to see Nani leave, and some of them even cried. Nani also cries, and she leaves the manor, accompanied by Endal. 2 hours prior to Nani's departure, Sira cried her eyes out and felt so sorry for working her so hard, not knowing she was sick. She hugged Nani tightly for 30 minutes. They were both crying. An hour after that, Sira was still crying, but this time she was in Ian's arms. Riley told her to stop being a crybaby, and it was then she dialed it down a little. She gave Nani her favorite handkerchief, and Nani promised to always treasure it. Ian also gave her his sword, which would serve as a reminder that she would always be a part of House Ephialta. He made her promise to come back, and not just for him, but for Riley. Afterward, Lady Iris came in, and also brought a gift for Nani, who at this point was overwhelmed, and couldn't hold on to all the gifts she had been given. However, Lady Iris's gift didn't require all that, since it was a hairband. She tied it on Nani's head, and Nani thanked her. Riley saved his gift for last, and he gave her an apple. The apple is a reminder of their conversation when he told her to stay alive. He then asked her to survive and come back to help him pick up some apples. Fast forward to Nani's departure. She is walking with Endal and tells her she's his new student. He tells her to address him as teacher, but then changes his mind like an oaf and tells her to call him guru. He then laughs and walks in front of her. Nani promises to get well quickly and come back to the manor to see all of them again. Meanwhile, at the border camp, the prince and the elder discuss battle strategy on how to ward off the people that attacked the Solia border. They make mention of a mercenary that almost single-handedly decimated their troops, and if not for Count Epheleta's quick intervention, they would have been completely wiped out. Sadly, the Count's condition isn't good because he lost his right arm during the battle, and it's unlikely to be reattached. Angrily, the team leader asks that a bounty be put on the heads of Kaval and his mercenary brigade, because he can't allow Count Epheleta's sacrifice be in vain. At night, Lyad wanders the house and thinks back at his brother's decision earlier with Nani. He realizes that Ryan has changed because back then, both their mother and Ryan used to do the right thing. However, he shrugs it off and stops thinking about it. He glances at the window and sees Riley with Ian. Just then, someone announces that the Count has returned, but not in one piece. Riley and his brothers anxiously rush to see him, but Count is accompanied by some people. Nara sees that one of the people accompanying the Count has a purple energy. She looks at his face, and it turns out to be Lebesla, the priest she saw in Rainfield. Upon seeing their father, Ryan screams and asks what happened to his hand. Riley is short of words, and still caught up by the shock. Just then, the Count puts up the poster of Kaval, and tells them he is a fierce mercenary he met on the battlefield. Riley recognized him right away, as the guy they met outside Rainfield. The Count tells him Kaval's strength on the battlefield was uncanny, and he literally generated gusts of wind with his powerful swings. However, he would have bested him if it were a one-on-one fight, but it wasn't, and he got wounded. Riley discovers that another person close to him has been injured. He had chosen to stay out of whatever trouble happened around him, and that has been the rule he lived by. He promised himself never to put himself in a position to lose everything like he did in his past life, but he never imagined such a terrible thing happening to his father. Just while he was thinking about this, his father made an important announcement. Count Epheleta announced that it was time to name a successor to the head of House Epheleta. Later in the night, Riley is seen lying down at the top of a moving carriage and thinking back to the time in the Count's office. The Count addressed the three candidates and told them he had decided on a task for them to perform. They are to help the Solian villages that have been made vulnerable due to the havoc wreaked by the Anthurium's border incursions. Afterward, Riley leaves the office, but he gets called to a corner by Nara. She then informs him about Libesla and his purple aura, which is the same as Kaval's. Back on top of the carriage, Riley thinks about how the country is in trouble, and also how they need to keep an eye on Libesla. He then wonders if it's really the best time to be competing for succession. Ian, who is controlling the carriage, briefs Riley about their destination. It is a small village called Alev, filled with a little over 100 people, and surrounded by dense forests. He continues that there have been reports of strange orc activity in the area, but Riley doesn't seem to be listening. He gets the name of the village wrong, but Ian corrects him with frustration, as they gallop toward their destination. The next day, they arrive at Aleve, and they are stopped by a man who interrogated them. They tell him they're from House Epheleta, and he thanks them for coming. He introduces himself as Malto, the village chief, and also welcomes them. Riley then asks him where his people are, because it won't have been this quiet if they were hiding. Malto tells him that about 10 of their people have suddenly gone missing, and it began 4 days earlier. At first, it was 1 or 2 children unaccounted for, but then the number increased drastically. Riley is now tasked with not only maniac orc, but now missing children. He then remembers dealing with children in his past life. They were roaming about the city out of their minds and covered in blood. The children recognized his sword and called him the warrior, but they assumed he was there to kill them. The kids asked him to make their death quick and painless, and Riley in that situation did as they asked. While he was deep in thought, Ian called him back to the real world and asked him how he intends on finding the children. They have no lead on their whereabouts and also have the orcs to worry about. Riley responds that it might be a pain, but sitting around and doing nothing won't get them anywhere. Riley then breaks down the event and reasons that some of the children might still be in the vicinity since they didn't all go missing at once. He then concludes that the missing children, the villagers, and the orcs are all birds he will kill with 1 stone. He unsheaths his sword and moves toward Malto, who in turn begs him to spare his life. Riley is surprised by his reaction and asks Malto why he initially thought he was after his life. Malto makes reference to the killing with 1 stone thing he said earlier, but it is just an idiom. What he meant was that he will deal with the orcs and find the kidnapped children all at once. Ian then asks Riley if he's sure about using his sword, but he tells him to tag along if he's that worried for his safety. Ian tagged along with him, and Malto wished them luck. Soon, they come across a gang of orcs, and they decide it's showtime. Riley leaps into the tree with lightning speed and lunges at the orcs. He slices through them easily, and Ian is amazed by his speed. However, he noticed that his moves do not believe in the Epheleta swordsmanship manual. Suddenly, he hears Riley telling him to get a move on, and he is shocked that Riley is able to use telepathy. Riley manages to defeat 33 orcs, but Ian has told him earlier that they were about 150 of the monsters. While slicing through the remaining orcs, Riley tells Ian that a couple of the orcs are unaccounted for, and Ian asks how he knows about that. Out of nowhere, a giant orc snorts behind Ian and claims to avenge the death of his brothers. Meanwhile, Riley has defeated 90 orcs, but he realizes his sword wouldn't be able to handle much more. Now, he has to hurry up and find the missing children. The orcs standing guard try to get more reinforcement, but Riley arrives early, and they start to falter. Just then, Riley notices he can't see any children, and tries to sense them nearby. As a result of his focus, he gets about 14 life signatures, but their energy levels are falling. He quickly runs toward the location and sees a cave. Sadly, the number of signatures he could sense decreased, and he wondered if it was too late yet again. However, he pulls himself toward and heads into the cave. Inside the cave, he smells a stench and sees dead orcs everywhere. He wonders who killed them, but he also sees a dark figure approaching him. Meanwhile, the kidnapped children in the cave worry about living and when the orcs will come and eat them. Just then, they see Riley and ask him who he is. He tells them he's there to rescue them, and the kids leap for joy. Riley then asks them if there was someone else with them earlier, and the kids happily say the name Epidemic. They claim he is a beggar man, but he is the one that hid them in the cave and also left something at the entrance. Riley checks the entrance and sees the message left behind by Epidemic. The message instructs him to take the children to the temple because some of them have been exposed to the pestilence, which is a disease. Soon, the kids start to complain about itches on their skin, and Riley realizes It is Epidemic's doing. He decides to get the kids out of there, and outside the cave, he counts them, and they are all complete. Ian rushed in, worried, but Riley assured him the kids are safe. He then asks the children for more information about the beggar, and the kids start saying nice things about him. They say he is nice, and his hair was all the way down to his belly button. One of the kids even says the beggar didn't breathe, and Riley makes a scary face. According to the kid, Epidemic didn't breathe around the kids, because it would have put them in danger. Hearing this, Riley wondered if his breath was what killed the orcs. He also noticed hints of purple in their fluids, and wondered what it was all about. Meanwhile, Epidemic is in an unknown location, releasing an awful stench along the way. He thinks about the kids he left behind, and hopes they are okay, because he did all he could. Suddenly, somebody calls him the Left Hand, which makes him flinch, and the person turns out to be Kaval. Kaval is accompanied by a lady, and she doesn't seem to be able to stand Epidemic's stench. Kaval tells him he would have sent Lebezla to come for him if he had known he was in the fringes of Solia. Epidemic doesn't seem very happy to see them, and Kaval tells him not to give him that look, because they turn the whole of Anthurium upside down looking for him. Angrily, Epidemic lets out his breath and tells Kaval to keep his distance, because if he gets clipped, only Lebezla will be able to save him. Kaval is shocked about Epidemic's sudden behavior and asks him why he would do such a thing to a fellow member of the Six. Epidemic tells him he doesn't want to be a part of their group, and they should leave him be. Kaval covers his nose and raises his axe. He then attacks Epidemic, claiming he always knew he didn't like him. At Alev, Malto thanks Riley and Ian for returning the children, but Riley tells him to get them to the temple for treatment. Malto quickly rushed the kids into a carriage and headed toward the temple. After they left, Riley decided to sleep in for a couple days, but he gets questioned by Ian. Ian asks about his swordsmanship and how he has become so proficient at wielding a sword. Riley replies that he merely pictured moves in his head and goes for it, but Ian isn't buying it. He also asks about the telepathy he used earlier, but Riley pretends to be oblivious to it. Ian knows he's hiding something, but proceeds to let him know that he's always believed in his potential, and at that point, Riley was tired of Ian's shenanigans. Just then, a messenger hawk lands on Ian's arm with a note. The note is from Nara, and she informs Riley that the Dark Mage is alive. Riley is surprised by this, but Ian doesn't know what's going on. Apparently, before leaving the manor, Riley told Nara to look into Lebezla, and now, with the news about the Dark Mage, he can't help but think Lebezla had something to do with it. Out of curiosity, Ian starts to question Riley about the incident in Rainfield, but Riley refuses to tell him. He then grabs Riley by his shirt and shakes him until Riley decides to let him in on the story. After about an hour, Riley finally finished the storytelling, and Ian believed him. Ian then suggests that they go back to Solia to fix the problem, but Riley reminds him that they can't just walk away from the succession process. Brimming with fire, Ian says there is nothing more important than finding and destroying the Dark Mage. Riley then accepts his plea, and they set off for Solia. Riley reasoned that him becoming successor to his father has always been Ian's dream. Ian willing to sacrifice that, without hesitation, shows how important it is to him. Ian is more than certain that it is more important to stop the Dark Mage, who has been responsible for ushering the death of so many. Even though to Ian, people come first, Riley still can't stand the idea of losing the limited time he has with those important to him yet again. In Rainfield, some creatures sit around a table and discuss how long it's been since they last gathered. They appear to be waiting for Endal, who apparently told them he'll be coming with a disciple. The green orc calls Endal a wacko, and speaking of the devil, Endal arrives. He complains about the humidity in Rainfield, and asks if everyone is present. The female elf replies that they couldn't get in touch with one of them, and even his lair was empty. The creatures see Nani, and the green orc gets tempted to try her against his guardians. However, the Groot-looking creature shuts him down and claims she's just a weak female human. Just then, Endal mentions that she could dispatch all of them with her little finger, and they just laugh it off. Endal tries to defend himself, but the elf tells them to quit arguing because they have more important matters to discuss. The elf narrates a series of events involving Libezla and the Dark Mage to the crew, and they were all surprised by this. Afterward, she asks Nani to speak up as a first-hand witness to all these events, and Nani obliges. Nani tells them about her encounter with the Dark Mage in Rainfield. She explained that he used a purple magic similar to her own, but he also had the ability to reanimate and control the dead. His powers don't sound like a big deal to Groot, but the Lady Elf clarifies that the Dark Mage's necromancy involves his victim's soul as well. Nani tells them that the reanimated creatures disappeared along with their souls when Riley defeated the Dark Mage. The Lady Elf asks Nani about her eye, and if she can use it to locate people through the mind of others. Nani agreed with her, but others were surprised. The elf then asks if she can use it on the dead, and proceeds to ask where the Dark Mage she's thinking about is. Nani looks into her mind, and is terrified to see the Dark Mage. Others start to get worried about her, but she holds her eye and wonders how on earth the Dark Mage is still alive. Meanwhile, Riley and Ian have arrived at Rainfield, and Riley suggests they fill their stomachs first. However, Ian suggests they quickly join up with Nara, but Riley tells him proper preparation should come first. Besides, he's vying to become the successor, hence their actions must be discreet. After entering the restaurant, Riley sees a couple of masks on a board, and an image of Nani pops into his head. Ian snaps him out of it, and afterward, Riley buys some masks. He gives one to Ian, and assures him they'll come in handy. A few minutes later, Ian calls Riley's attention to a group of people marching, and they recognize Perda as one of them. Judging from his demeanor, they knew something was up, and wondered if he was headed toward Lower Solia. Riley suggests they follow them and tail them quietly. Soon, Perda and his crew stop at a stairwell, but they hear a loud sound like that of an animal. Perda tells the others to get the townspeople to safety. They turn around and inform the people around to get to safety because they're in danger. Suddenly, a hand reaches up from the stairwell, and it belongs to some kind of zombie. Perda tries to use his vine magic spell to subdue the creature, while the townspeople get to safety. Unfortunately, a few other monsters rush up the stairwell, and people start to panic. Ian and Riley see this, and figure out that they must be reanimated corpses. They then decide to go see Nara immediately. Perda, on the other hand, struggles with the corpses, but manages to secure entrance with his spell. Meanwhile, the Dark Mage appears to have acquired the body Grand Mage Astroa, all thanks to Libezla. Libezla advises him to not lose his new body, and he agrees that dying again would be ungrateful. He then promises to get revenge and summons more corpses from the ground. Perda and his crew were still wondering how the zombies keep coming back when they hear a voice call to them. They were surprised to see Astroa, accompanied with Libezla, and ask them what they were doing. Just then, an army of the dead appears in front of them, and they get terrified. They try to run and get reinforcements from the magic tower and the temple, but the Dark Mage wouldn't let them. He grabbed them with magic tentacles, but Perda managed to cut them loose with fire magic, causing the Dark Mage and Libesla to smile at his resilience. In the temple, Frisia prayed to Irenessa concerning the revelations regarding Libesla and the dragon. Just then, Irenessa calls her. She tells Frisia to seek the dark butterflies because the child of the dark butterflies will show her the right path. Further along, Ian looks troubled, and Nara asks him if he is fine. Afterward, she asks them what they noticed about the reanimated corpses. Riley responds that the zombies could walk around on their own, without any traces of mana. Riley asks her what she has found out about Libesla. She says that he was working in the temple all day, and then she found him coming out of Lower Solia in the evening. With that information, Riley deduced that Libesla has something to do with the zombies in town. Consequently, Ian tells them that the eyes of the zombies look awfully familiar to him. He then narrates a story of something that happened 26 years ago, which is an event he regrets till the present day. Back then, he was dispatched to a small village to serve as a mercenary. There, he met a woman who everyone condemned as a witch. The woman happened to have the same dark eyes as the zombies in town, and that was why she was thought to be a witch. However, after meeting her, he realized she was far from such as she wielded a sword. She became his teacher and taught him the way of the sword, giving his life purpose. When he asked her about her dark eyes, she told him she was blessed with it. Those eyes gave her powers, not of their world, but another. This shocks Riley, but they suddenly get startled by a loud noise. Ian looks out and sees that the magic tower has collapsed. Riley wonders how Perda could let that happen, but Ian tells him the tower has fallen in the direction of the temple, which could put Frisia in trouble. Riley puts on his mask and suggests they all head to the temple. On the way to the temple, a lot of people were injured and trapped as a result of the tower collapsing. Ian manages to rescue a woman, but she tells him about her son, who is also trapped. As he tries to find her son, she points behind him and tells him someone is trying to attack him. Ian swings his sword backwards in self-defense, but the person turns out to be Frisia. Frisia asks him to put his sword away, and she doesn't seem to recognize him because of the mask. After helping everyone with her magic, she proceeds to ask Ian, Riley, and Nara who they are, but they do not reveal their identity. Frisia decides not to pry any longer, since they are there to help. They resume striking down the zombies, but Frisia screams not to kill them. Ian wonders how to stop the zombie without killing them, and suddenly the zombies start to cast spells. Surprised by this, Ian suggests to Riley that they must flee at once, but they hear a voice saying it isn't up to them. Frisia and Riley see Astroa and Libesla in front of them, but couldn't believe their eyes, since they believed Astroa was dead. Frisia asks Libesla if it's all his doing, but he passes the mantle to Astroa, who throws Perda into the ground. Perda tells them the man they see isn't Astroa, and Riley senses that the energy coming from Astroa belongs to the Dark Mage. He then wonders how he was able to take over Astroa's body. Just then, Frisia screams at Libesla and asks him why he is standing with Astroa, but strangely, Libesla rips off some flesh on his face, revealing his true identity. With a scary expression, he tells her, it is the least of her worries, because all of them are about to die. Riley responds by saying it was high time he showed his true face, and upon seeing Riley, Astroa's body started shaking. The Dark Mage deduced that Riley must be the person that killed his new body, but Riley smirked and told him he was already responsible for his own death. This makes the Dark Mage pissed off, as he recalled how Riley ruined his lifelong dream. Libesla is also surprised to see Riley, and says that he should have known there was more about him that met the eye. However, he can't let him live now that he has seen his true face. Riley replies that he's not planning to die, and they now appear to have reached an impasse. He then tells them to stop their attempt to open up the gates to the netherworld, and this surprises the villains, who start to wonder how he knows about their plan. Sadly, Riley talks a bit too much and lowers his guard. The dark mage uses the opening to attack Riley's companions, and just as he tries to save them, the dark mage also traps him with the tentacle. Out of nowhere, a fireball is sent toward Frisia, and Perda can't stop it since his powers have been drained. Frisia doesn't react quick enough, and just closes her eyes, believing it is her fate to die there. However, she sees dark butterflies and remembers Irenesa's instructions to her. Like a hero, Nani appears out of thin air, in purple magic, just in time, and saves Frisia. She then breaks Riley free from the trap and apologizes for arriving late. Seeing this shocks Libesla, and he wonders who she is. The dark mage as well was surprised she could use spatial inversion, which is a 7th circle spell. Perda thought he heard wrong, and asked Nani how a 6th circle mage like her could suddenly use a 7th circle spell. Nani tells him that they'll catch up later because she has more important things to do. She then asks Riley to brief her about the situation, and he calls Astroa and Libesla the bad guys. She then tells him to stand back while she takes care of them quickly. Nani gets to work and incapacitates the zombies in her way with her magic, but some of them start to cast spells. She deals with those ones as well, and also sends her sword through one of the zombies behind Ian. She tells Ian she's been working on her swordsmanship, which he admits is evident. While Libesla was wondering how Nani got so strong, Nani sent an attack behind them. Libesla and the dark mage managed to repel it, but Libesla is curious about what Riley is doing. Riley does absolutely nothing, and Libesla sees him just yawning like a tired dog. They then proceed to put their focus on Nani, and the dark mage, Huriel, sends a fireball toward her. Unfortunately for them, Nani blocks the fireball with her cloak, which is fire repellent, and she starts to overwhelm them with her purple magic. Just then, Libesla suggests they use their last resort, and Huriel gets down with it. However, Huriel claims he will need about 30 seconds, because that's how long it will take him to summon the beast. Suddenly, a black magic circle appears behind Libesla, and Riley notices this. He quickly tells Nani to finish them off before Libesla can try something new. Nani uses all her strength to try and overwhelm them both, but Huriel seems to be putting up a good fight. However, Huriel gets tired and asks Libesla how much time he needs to get the work done. Libesla replies that the work is done and lets out an evil smirk. He then calls out his summon, and the ground starts to shake as if an earthquake is about to happen. Just then, a large creature breaks out from the ground and stares down at Riley and Nani. They realize that it is a dragon, and Riley wonders how on earth they were able to summon a dragon, even though it's not fully formed yet. Swiftly, Huriel jumps on the dragon and wraps it up with the tentacle magic. The dragon struggles for a while, but soon it opens its eyes, and it turns out to be similar to that of the zombies. Afterward, Huriel claims to finally get his revenge, and the dragon lets out a loud screech. Suddenly, the dragon starts to suck in the air, and Riley had to hold onto the ground with his sword so he wouldn't get sucked into the dragon's mouth. Nani realizes that the dragon is trying to create a dragon breath, and she remembers Endal's warning about dragon breath. He told her the only thing that can stop a dragon breath is dragon breath. Hence, if she's unable to avoid the dragon breath, she is goner. Nani wonders how people who weren't able to put up with her 7th circle spells earlier could suddenly summon a dragon, and the culprits laughed in her face. Nani looks into the dragon's mouth, which is filled with dragon breath, and becomes terrified. She wonders if it is the end after all, but she sees Riley in front of her, asking why she's scared. Riley tells her she's not alone, and reminds her of the first conversation they had back in Solia. He tells her that he will help her, and they're in it together. Huriel couldn't be happier at the sight, because now they can take out both of them for the price of one. Just then, the dragon shoots its breath at them, and Riley holds on to Nani. He tells her that she can pick those apples for him in their next life. Nani feels guilty because Riley will end up dead because of her, and she starts to apologize to everyone they knew. Huriel and Libesla celebrate their victory, but suddenly they feel a rush of fire quenching their dragon breath. Libesla asks Huriel what is happening, but he doesn't seem to know. Just then, a red dragon appears out of the blue and blows its breath into that of the undead dragon. The yellow flame completely extinguishes the blue flame, leaving the culprits with nothing but failure. Riley calls Nani, but she appears to be enjoying their moment a little too much. After returning to her senses, she smiles awkwardly at Riley, which catches him off guard. Just then, they get scolded by Endal, who had warned initially not to do anything stupid. The mere sight of the red dragon terrifies Libesla, and he remembers Frisia telling him that a dragon will appear in Solia. Endal approaches the two culprits, and no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't move. Endal looks down at Libesla, who at this point might have peed himself. He tells them to wait while he goes to take care of their undead dragon. Huriel tries to do something, but Libesla warns him not to move and just stay where he is for now. Riley commends Libesla for being smart, and asks Endal what he plans to do with the undead dragon. Endal says he doesn't know the dragon personally, so he has no problem obliterating it. He then burned the dragon with his breath, and mashed on it, till it was completely gone. He then goes back for the other two, and he is accompanied by Riley, acting like the boogeyman. Huriel tries to say something, but Riley slashes his chest, and he starts to beg for his life. Riley claims that he won't give him an easy death, and he uses his time attribute to keep him on the ground. Libesla laughs hysterically, which makes Riley wonder what he has up his sleeve. Before attempting to finish him off, Riley decides to interrogate him and feed his curiosity. Riley asks him about their big dream, how they got the dragon, and their funny business with the netherworld. Libesla smirks like an evil mastermind as he prepares to tell Riley about their dream. However, he doesn't have any plans of saying anything, and he just wants to stall Riley. Sadly, his plans got ruined when Huriel started revealing the truth to Riley. Huriel says their dream is to gather the souls of humanity and open up the gates to the netherworld. Also, the dragon was a gift from the one below. Libesla screams at Huriel to stop snitching, but Riley asks him what the netherworld is. As Huriel tries to explain, his face suddenly starts to swell, and within a few seconds, he explodes. Apparently, it was done by Libesla, and he claimed he had no choice but to stop him from revealing their secrets totally. This pisses Riley off, and he doesn't even want to hear about their secret anymore. All he wanted to do was slice up Libesla and leave him to take his secret to his grave. He raised up his sword and slashed Libesla, but he was protected by a force field. The force field happened to have been generated by the female elf, who eventually tells Riley that she will be taking Libesla back with her. Through her energy, Riley quickly guessed that she's a dragon, and she introduced herself as Isilter, the leader of the dragons. She claimed that dragons have long worked together to preserve the world balance and also protect the Wheel of Fate, which is why the priest must come with her. She tells Riley about her intention of extracting information from him before disposing of him, but Riley refused her request. She tries to convince Riley that killing him now won't do any good, because things might be fine in 100 years, but there's no guarantee. Riley doesn't agree with her, and resumes striking the force field around Libesla. He says he prefers to live in peace now and leave the trouble to the heroes in the future. He leaves a crack into the force field, and judging from his energy, Isilter realizes his mana is beyond measure. Isilter holds Riley up with magical chains and tells him what he's experiencing is a flash of time, but Riley wouldn't budge. He breaks through the chains and starts walking toward Libesla. He tells Isilter that he's tired and sick of all the worries in his life. He approaches Libesla and attempts to slash, but he gets stopped by Voice. The voice belongs to a shadow-like figure, and he says he is disappointed in Libesla for waking him up far too early. A very big hand comes up from the ground and moves toward Libesla. Riley tries to swat it away, but the hand breaks his sword in half. The hand grabs Libesla and starts getting away, but Riley follows it. However, a dark figure appears in front of Riley and claims he is trying to flee from his past life. Riley is shocked to hear this, and the figure says his memories are quite fascinating. The figure thanks Riley for the show and gives him a gift in return. The gift was a sweeping punch to the chest, and Riley crashed into a building. Afterward, Isilter tries to hold the hand with her magical chains, but she isn't strong enough. Nani then joins her, but it is too late, and the hand is gone. Nani tries to locate it with her eyes, but what she sees is the modern world she once saw in Riley's dream, and a dark figure flying in it. Nani tries to figure out Riley's connection to the strange world, and concludes that Riley must be hiding something. Then, a few hours after the altercation, Leotrina briefs Count Epheleta about the incident. She tells him that his suspicions about Riley are right. When she provoked him earlier, he showed a bit of strength, which means he's deliberately concealing his true strength. After she suggested Riley best his guard, Riley called her guard delusional. This upset the guard, and he tried to unsheath his sword. But he is met with Ian, who tells him not to get ahead of himself on Epheleta grounds. Leotrina senses Riley's lack of cooperation and threatens to report him to his father. Riley calls her bluff, but she insists on telling the Count that she wants them to be betrothed. Hearing this changes Riley's mind, and he asks Ian to referee the fight. Riley gets ready to fight the guard, and the guard glares at him. Riley mocks the guard for attempting to scare him, but he stands no chance. Suddenly, he gets a flashback about how people used to refer to him as the warrior, and this makes me feel nauseous. He backs away from the fight, and the guard becomes furious. While Riley's back was turned, the guard ran toward him with a sword, but Riley's aura pinned him to the ground. Leotrina sees this and asks Riley how he was able to do that, but Riley pretends he didn't do anything to her guard. After explaining this to the Count, Leotrina laments that Riley already finds her annoying, and they can't be matched anymore. The Count then offered Leod to her, but she tells him he doesn't give her much thrill. She then proposed an alternative. Usually, the invitation to her family's banquet service is given to the Epheleta family's successor. However, she would like to extend the invitation to someone else this time. In the living room, Riley snuggles with Nani and blames himself for letting himself be carried away earlier with Leotrina. Just then, Nani tries to talk about his reason for backing out of the fight, and if it is related to the other world, but Riley asks her not to talk about it. He then summons Hellion, and she comes out of hiding. Afterward, Riley asks her about the procedures needed to turn Nani into an artificial fairy. Hellion explains that the process must be done during the spring because it's the best time to meet the perfect fairy. Also, they have to meet the perfect fairy in the Western lands, but Riley asks her to be more specific. Unfortunately, she is a fairy, and she can't explain it any further in human language. Riley gets confused and asks Nani what she thinks about the whole process. Nani replies that she's ready to do whatever it takes, as long as it will allow her to stay by his side. Just then, Helione finds a way to ruin the mood by asking an unnecessary question. She asks Riley who he thinks is prettier between Leotrina and Nani. Riley wonders why she's suddenly asking such a dumb question, but Nani suddenly catches Helione before she could spill any more crap. She then scolds Helione before dashing out like she's running from death, leaving Riley confused. Later in the afternoon, Riley goes to his father's office after being summoned. After entering the office, Lloyd takes his leave, but gives Riley a quick glance. Riley asks if there was something on his face, but Lloyd says he is just getting a good look at him before leaving. Ryan's departure must have taken a huge toll on him, and he rushed out in embarrassment. Afterward, the Count hands Riley a letter, and as soon as he reads it, he screams that he won't go. The letter is an invitation to the Felizneon family banquet, and Riley says he isn't interested in hearing people badmouth him. He angrily slams the letter on the table and claims his father should have asked him first, before telling him to accompany a lady he just met to a banquet. The Count has never seen Riley that angry before, but he urges him to calm down. He then asks why he has hidden his true talents from him. Also, he shouldn't try to deny it because he has heard all about it from Ian, Iris, and even Sarah. Riley thought about this and fell into the darkness of his past life. There, he was surrounded by people who hated him, blamed him for their misfortune, and never commended him for helping them whatsoever. His father then asks about the medal he received, and how he was present during the Grand Mage's defeat. Strangely, Riley doesn't seem to remember this, and he is getting consumed by dark figures, calling him a pathetic excuse of a warrior. Soon, multiple dark figures gather in Riley's face and start to curse his name for letting them die in vain. It reached a point that he couldn't hold it anymore, and he screams out that he didn't kill them. While he tries to deny their deaths, an image of Lady Orlis and her father begging him to spare them pops up. The Count manages to calm him down, and he apologizes for being out of it. The Count suggests he goes to his room to rest, and Riley leaves. Just before leaving, the Count tells Riley that he believes in him, but Riley just slams the door behind him. Deep down, the Count never called him because of the invitation. He called him to tell him how proud he is of him. However, he wonders what his son is hiding from him this time. The next day, Riley, Ian, and Nani are getting ready for their journey to the Western Lands, but they're waiting for Sarah to arrive with her luggages. After arriving, Sarah asks about the horses and carriages, but Riley tells her they'll be going by foot. Sarah gets shocked, but Nani creates a magical portal and tells her they'll be teleporting there. Riley goes in first, and Nani tells Ian and Sarah to quickly follow up, because once the portal closes, it will take a while before it reopens. However, Ian and Sarah seem to have trust issues, but Nani convinces them that it's completely safe because she created it. In the Western Lands, Ian is nowhere to be found, and they realized that he was too scared to use the portal. Sarah wonders if they'll have to open it again, but Nani says it will take about 15 days before she can do that again. Then, they suggest they keep on moving and meet up with Ian later in the day. While they walk through the blizzards, Nani asks Sarah why she has decided to join them. Sarah replies that Lady Iris was the one who asked her to join Riley. The lady claimed she would be more at ease if she went with them, and that's why she was sent along. Meanwhile, Riley remembers his mother's words to him. She made him promise to keep in touch this time, and also find courage to ask for help. She warned him not to carry all his burdens alone. At night, the three of them make a campfire in a cave. There, Nani and Sarah figure out their location on a map. Sarah suggests that they can take a detour through the Felisni on land since they sent Riley an invitation. Nani thinks about Leotrina's invitation and accidentally cuts herself. Sarah fixes her up and tells her she's too pretty to be injuring herself. Nani feels like she's just saying that to make her feel better, but Sarah insists that she means it. Sarah mentions all her qualities, and that's what makes her pretty. Nani then mentions her scarred face and how she only gets things right because of the help she gets from everyone else. Sarah tells her not to think like that because beauty comes from without. She has come a long way, and her face might be what's making her blind to her true beauty. Nani then asks her if Riley would think the same, and Sarah tells her to ask him if she's that curious. She rushes to meet Riley, who is standing at the entrance of the cave, staring at the blizzards. She tries to ask him about it, but after seeing his face, she realized he's not been sleeping. She then asks him if it was due to his nightmares, but Riley just shuts it down and attempts to sleep it off. Suddenly, they hear animals growling, and they presume it to be a pack of wolves. Riley pulls his sword and suggests they kill the wolves, but Nani smacks his hand and tells him he doesn't have to do things that way anymore, leaving him shocked. Nani holds Riley's hands and tells him he doesn't have to draw his sword every time, because that's not what he wants. She then asks him to let her handle the wolves with her words. The wolves approach her, with their eyes glowing, and a purple aura coming from them. Nani approaches them gently, and at first, the wolves snarl at her. But they eventually calm down, and Nani pats them on the head. Riley asks her how she did that, and she tells him she learned it from the mythical creatures in Endal's cave. However, Nani notices the purple aura of the wolves and tells Riley about it. He also seems to recognize it from the cave where he saved the children. Nani then tells him that Isilter and Endal are chasing some people, and one of those people is responsible for the purple aura on the wolves. Riley says Epidemic is the person behind it, and Nani also mentions something about Kaval, too. She claims that they're using a strange power like magic, but it is different. She then suggests letting the wolves accompany them, because they can be quite helpful in frozen lands. Riley accepts her request, but Sarah seems terrified, and asks if they can just send the wolves on their way. After a while, Nani sleeps peacefully with the wolves while Riley and Sarah are awake. They both talk, and Sarah mentions here she was once attacked by dogs in South Solia, which gave her phobia for dogs. She asks Riley about his phobias, but she just assumes he has any. However, Riley easily deduces that her phobias are related to South Solia, and Sarah was surprised he could read her easily. Sarah talks about her keen sense of smell, and further explains why it is much sharper than most. When she was young, she used to beg on the streets and always got beaten up. Due to that, her sense of smell sharpened, and she was able to escape certain people that were known to beat her up. After hearing her story and her phobias, Riley asks her if she has gotten over any of them, but she says she hasn't. However, she doesn't let it keep her from enjoying life, because everyone's got fears, even Nani and him as well. She makes the point that everyone can live with one phobia or two. All they have to do is ask for help. But they must first acknowledge they have one, and only then will they be able to ask for help. Riley gets vulnerable and attempts to share with Sarah, but she goes to stoke the fire and tells him to sleep first, while she takes the first watch. Meanwhile, somewhere in the wastelands, Kaval is seen complaining about something. Suddenly, he gets a call from the one below, and he listens. He gets informed about Huriel's death and Lebesla's incapacitation. Now, he is charged with joining up with the head, and together they will make a pilgrimage to find a replacement for Huriel and Libesla. Then, a purple orb drops to the ground, and he grabs it. He then vows to destroy the people that caused Huriel's death and wounded Libesla. Later in the afternoon, Riley seems out of it, and Nani worries about him yet again. However, he asks if lunch is ready, and promises to take a nap after. Helione suddenly pops out and calls out Nani for being too worrisome. Although, the matter of Riley not sleeping is worrying, and no one can live without sleeping, not even fairies. While Riley munches on his lunch, Helione and Nani cook up an idea on how to make him sleep. After a while, they continue their journey, but the blizzards are too much to handle. Sarah complains to Riley about it and how it's best they go back to the cave, but he refuses to stop. Just then, Nani catches up to him and offers to cast a resistance spell on him. She and Helione combine together and cast a spell on Riley, and he falls into Nani's arms. Sarah gets worried, but Nani tells her it was a sleeping spell she cast on him. It was the only way to get him to sleep, so his body won't waste away. Sarah points out that she saw him sleep the night before, but Nani says he was just pretending. He has been having trouble sleeping since way before they embarked on their journey. Afterward, Nani puts up a barrier spell and they head back to the cave. A week later, Riley becomes very sick, and Sarah is taking care of him. She is really worried about his health, which hasn't improved in over a week. Suddenly, a Yeti appears out of nowhere to claim the cave. Sarah draws her sword and attacks it. She dodges the Yeti's swing and strikes it from above. Just then, Nani also attacks the Yeti with an incineration spell, which ends up catching Sarah too. With the Yeti issue over, Nani apologizes for burning Sarah, and Sarah asks her if she found any medicine. Sadly, she wasn't able to, and Riley's fever was getting worse. Nani wonders why he isn't waking up, because the sleeping spell must have worn out. She regrets putting him under the spell in the first place, but Sarah grabs her and tells her to snap out of it. Sarah claims there's no time for self-pity, and they can't just stay in the cave doing nothing. She then suggests they leave for the only place they know they can get help, the Felisneon Castle. They arrive at the castle, but the guard at the gate doesn't let them in. Sarah begs him to help them because they've got a sick person with them, but the guard refuses. He claims that he will get in trouble if he allows anyone without an invitation into the castle. Sarah accepts his reason, but she starts to cry out of guilt and not knowing what else to do. Nani tells her not to cry and gives Riley to her to hold for a while. She goes toward the guard, and this time he's pointing his spear at her. She melts his spear, and he quickly realizes she's a mage and tries to call for backup. However, the emergency alarm button has been frozen up by Helione as well. Nani holds up a giant ball of purple fire and tells the guard to let them in. The guard lays on the ground, scared shitless. Inside the castle, the guests enjoy a banquet of food and drinks, and also discuss politics together with the current events in Solia. They talk about the blasted temple and how the saint has run away. Also, they talk about Count Epheleta and his chosen successor, and how he got into it with his firstborn son. Soon, they shifted to Leotrina and talked about her beauty and whatnot. Leotrina walks in, and she is disgusted by all the gossip. She thinks that the banquet is so dull, and now that Riley hasn't shown up, it will be really tedious for her to get through the party. Suddenly, a guard rushes in and informs her about the visitors from the Epheleta family. The moment she heard that name, the sparkle in her eyes returned, and she became alive again. Afterward, Riley is being taken care of by Nani and Sarah in a secluded room. In there, Riley groans and moans like he's fighting a battle in his sleep. Nani blames herself for inducing sleep on Riley. She thinks that he must have been avoiding something or someone from his past, which she didn't consider. She thinks that she's afraid of getting hurt because he's avoiding someone special from his past, and she starts to cry. Sarah notices this and tries to talk to her, but they hear a knock on the door. Afterward, Leotrina and her guard come in. After they enter, Sarah bows her head to greet Leotrina, but Nani just sits with Riley, ignoring her completely. The guard tries to scold her for being rude, but Leotrina cautions him instead and tells him to wait outside. After he leaves, Leotrina starts to talk to Sarah. She asks for their names, and Sarah tells her. She then apologizes for the earlier altercation, and Sarah also apologizes for causing a ruckus. Then, she asks if Riley is sick, but Sarah chooses not to answer. Completely understanding their intention, Leotrina decides not to pry anymore, but she lets them know that she's very much interested in Riley, and if there's anything else they need, they shouldn't hesitate to ask for it. Her calm demeanor surprises Sarah, who was expecting her to be a little less accommodating. Leotrina notices this and tells her that she's not only interested in Riley, but she also heard that one of them is the 7th Circle mage that defeated Grand Mage Astroa. This gets Nani's attention, and she asks Leotrina how she knows about her. Leotrina tells them it's a secret that they must keep amongst themselves as women. She decides to leave them be, and hopes that they find their stay in her home comfortable. The days later, Riley still hasn't woken up while Nani tends to him. Then, Sarah suggests that Nani should get some fresh air because she's been cooped up in the room for 3 days, taking care of Riley. Nani tries to refuse, but Helione joins up with Sarah to convince her, and she finally gives in. She leaves the room with Helione, while Sarah stays back to watch over Riley. She remembers the nastily comments she overheard during the banquet. Apparently, the guests in the banquet got to know that Riley was the one invited to the banquet, instead of the Epheleta successor. It made them furious, and they called Riley all sorts of names. However, one of them said Riley has a secret weapon, which is the hideous maid he brought along. The person claimed that the maid is a 7th Circle mage that defeated Astroa in the last spring. The person suggested getting her on their side and putting her at the top of the magic tower. However, others pointed out that it would be difficult to sell her for that post due to the ghastly scar on her face, and it would be better to look for better options. Sarah is upset about what she heard, and she condemns the nobles for saying such crass things about Nani without knowing what she is going through. Meanwhile, Nani gets approached by Leotrina during her short break of getting some air. Helione doesn't like Leotrina, and she makes a sassy comment about her presence being a stroke of bad luck. Nani whispers to her to keep quiet as she entertains Leotrina's small talk. Leotrina asks about Riley's health, but Nani tells her with a dejected face that he hasn't improved or worsened. Leotrina stares down at her face and accuses her of having a thing for Riley. Nani does a bad job of denying it, and Leotrina advises her to give up on her feelings. She tells her that the Epheleta house is a noble one, and she doubts the Count approve of her due to her scar, which apparently can't be removed. Helione gets furious at Leotrina and threatens to remove her head, but Nani tells her to calm down. Leotrina continues that no one would want to come to their wedding, and Nani agrees with her. Suddenly, Leotrina switches up and tells Nani not to look dejected. Although the people might not want to come, they have no choice but to attend. She tells Nani not to worry about her earlier comments, because they are just friendly jabs from a rival of Riley's heart. After Leotrina left, Nani sits on a bench while Helione talks smack about her. She claims that Endal would have burned her to a crisp due to those comments she made. Nani, however, feels sad about her comments because she knows Leotrina didn't mean them as a joke. Helione tries to get her to snap out of it, but Nani's self-esteem is on an all-time low, She points out that there is no point in getting back at Leotrina because there's no way she and Riley could be together in the first place. However, Helione tells her that it is possible, and once she becomes a fairy, her scar will clear up. Afterward, they both head up to their room to talk about the process. In the room, Helione recites some poetry about the perfect fairy's location, but Sarah and Nani can't seem to decipher it. Helione tells them it's a bit hard to pinpoint the exact location, but it is surely somewhere nearby. Upon hearing this, Nani tells Helione to picture the perfect fairy in her mind, since she has seen it before. Helione asks for the reason, and Nani tells her she intends to locate the perfect fairy with her eye. Helione pictures the fairy, and Nani tries to locate it with her eye. During the process, she feels a bit of pain in her eye, but she continues to search. After a while, she sees a dark figure and suddenly screams out, holding her right eye. Sarah tells her not to overwork herself, because Riley wouldn't want that, and she apologizes for being stubborn yet again. She then tells them she has the location of the fairy. However, when she was asked where the fairy was, she pointed at Riley. Helione and Sarah wonder why she's suddenly pointing at Riley, but she explains that he is the key to finding the perfect fairy. Helione points out there's nothing in the poetry that implies that Riley holds the answer, but Nani tells them they can't see those clues because they are inside his dream. Helione asks how it's possible that the fairy she met weeks ago is now inside Riley's dreams, and Nani says she's about to find out. She prepares herself to enter into Riley's dream, but Helione tries to stop her. Helione tells her that it's too dangerous because she could end up being a vegetable if she misses his way in another person's memories. This scares Sarah, and she advises Nani not to put herself any further. However, Nani insists on doing it because she believes it's the only way she can help him. Sarah then accepts her decision, but Helione isn't letting go. She tells Nani that Endal will turn her into a doll if she fails, and she'll also get into trouble with him as well. Nani tries to convince her that Endal wouldn't do such, but she crashes out and blames humans for always making irrational decisions. Nani holds her up and tells her that Riley has always been the reason she wanted to live as a fairy. She then tells Helione and Sarah to watch her back while she's in Riley's dreams. Sarah hugs her and makes her promise to come back safely. Afterward, Nani enters Riley's dreams and falls unconscious. Meanwhile, Leotrina wonders how Nani was able to develop into a 7th Circle mage that quickly, and she regrets not reading her mind long enough. Then, she hears a tap on her window, and she sees a strange bird delivering a message note to her. She opens it, and it is addressed from the right arm to the head. After reading the letter, she gets a crazy look in her eyes, and claims she has to make Riley hers. 2 days later, Riley and Nani are still unconscious, and Sarah is starting to worry. Helione tells her to cool her nerves because it's only been 2 days, and Sarah sighs. Helione claims that constant sighing won't help their case, and maybe she should pray to Ernessa instead. Sarah asks her how she knows about their religion, and she snitches on Nani. Suddenly, they hear a knock on the door, and it turns out to be Leotrina asking about Riley and Nani. Sarah tries her best to keep her off, but she ends up coming in. She then sees Riley and Nani sleeping side by side and holding hands. She gets pissed at the sight and attacks Sarah. Before Sarah could react, she had already been sent flying through the window. With a lustful look in her eyes, Leotrina grabs a hold of Riley and promises to share a whole lot of memories with him. Inside Riley's dream, everywhere is dark, and Nani tries to light it up with magic, but magic doesn't seem to work in there. She calls Riley as she walks through, but she gets no response, and the place is like a giant maze. Just then, she hears a sound coming closer to her. It turns out to be a firefly, but the firefly morphs into a dark butterfly. The butterfly calls her name and offers to show her some things. The butterfly takes Nani into the world Riley used to live in, and there, she finds the clues that were hidden in Heliane's poetry. The butterfly tells Nani that she's now in Riley's past life. Nani asks the butterfly who it is, and how it knows about Riley. The butterfly claims it would like to tell Nani all about itself, but they have limited time, and it has so many things to show her. It then morphs into a man wearing a raincoat. He begins to show Nani clips of Riley's past life by passing her one of his memories. In the memory, Riley is seen to have taken up a sword, which kicked off his destiny as the warrior. The man claims that Riley's previous world is much more dangerous than the one she's from. It might look beautiful to her, but it contains no forests or mana. The reason it survived without those things is because of Riley. He then points to a direction and asks Nani to look. There, a man is grabbed by hands from below, and the man gets dragged underground by those hands. Nani gets terrified after seeing this, and the narrator tells her that those hands belong to the creatures of the underworld, who Riley has defeated. Back then, people were left to defeat them alone, but Riley was the only person they could lean on, because he was the warrior. Nani sees Riley dragging his sword, and notices that he is very tired. The man in the raincoat explains that Riley became the warrior at the age of 3, and ever since, he's been wielding the sword every day. He took his first life at age 7, and at age 9, he was betrayed by his master, which led to the death of his older sister. At age 11, he tracked down the master and killed him. At age 12, he had already claimed over 1,000 heads, including that of demons. At 14, he was betrayed by a friend, who ended up killing his parents. Sadly, at that time, he was busy subjugating demons, and he could give his parents a proper burial. Later on, he went after that friend for revenge, but countless lives were lost as a result. Afterward, public opinion turned on him, and they blamed him for all the deaths. He temporarily halted his subjugation, which led to the demise of half the population, and he was punished for it. Nani asks why he was punished, and he replies that it was the easy way out. The goddess had cursed Riley with a form that prevented him from ever dying, and like a slave, he was sent to carry out her witch hunt, both demons and innocent alike. This caused resentment to be directed toward him, and he was eventually rendered incapable of saving them. A memory shows Riley talking to a bunch of possessed kids. The kids asked him to help them, and also blamed him for their misfortune. However, with tears and agony, Riley raised up his sword and slashed them all. When Riley turned 16, he defeated the Demon King, but lost his life in the process. Considering all he went through, it's a wonder he hasn't gone insane. However, he is currently in a precarious state because the memories he suppressed have now reached breaking point. Even though his true intention was to let Riley enjoy his new life, he failed to his own shame and is forced to ask Riley for help once again. Sadly, if nothing is done, far too many people will die, not just in his world, but in her world as well. Just then, he unveils his true identity, and it turns out to be a female and not a fairy. Nani asks the lady if she's the god of Riley's world, and the one who gave her the eye. She replies that she can't call herself a deity, and their meeting is solely based on the grace of Ironessa. However, she is responsible for her eye, and she'll understand if she resents her for it. Nani scowls at her, and asks her if it was done because of Riley, and the fairy claims she was the best option. Moving forward, Nani further asks if any of her choices have been hers, and the fairy tells her she's been the one making her own choices ever since she met Riley. Nani is relieved to hear this, and she asks for what to do to help Riley. On the contrary, the fairy decides to take care of her problems first, and rid her of her burdens. Luckily, it won't require any transformation, and she'll get to remain human. With a little time left, the fairy asks Nani to close her eyes, and informs her that when she awakens, she should tell Riley to pick up his sword again for the sake of both their worlds. Nani feels that Riley wouldn't like that, and opens her eyes. The fairy asks her to shut her eyes again, and tells her about the purple ones in her world. The power they wield is of this world, and if they're left unchecked, it will create an imbalance between both worlds, which will lead to the end of all things. Just then, Nani asks for one final request. She tells the fairy to give her all of Riley's past memories, so she can reduce the burden on him. The fairy tries to warn her against it, but she's very adamant, and wouldn't take no for an answer. The fairy holds up a light containing Riley's memories of pain and agony, and passes it on to Nani. Suddenly, the fairy lets out a scream, and says that she won't be able to keep up her form much longer. She starts to fade away, and she gives Nani a couple of instructions. She tells Nani to find Riley's holy sword, and it is held by one of the purple ones in her world. Lastly, she must find the purple one that will help their cause, and the basilisk will be the key to it. The fairy fades back into a butterfly and enters Nani's eye. A few moments later, Nani is back into her world, but sees nobody's around. She tries to call them, but she gets a surge of Riley's painful memories. She holds her ground, and doesn't let the memories eat her up, but she couldn't control her tears. Afterward, she realizes that her scar and the inner anguish she used to feel were gone. Also, she can feel her mana surging back, and uses it to create a portal. Suddenly, she hears a scream outdoors, and wonders if it is Leotrina. She decides to ignore the scream and look for her friends first. She teleports outside the room and runs into the front gate guard. He doesn't recognize her and starts complimenting her for being a pretty mage. She disappears from there and realizes the people might start treating her differently because her scar is gone. Then, she appears in front of Sarah, and she also doesn't recognize her. She grabs a hold of Sarah, and they teleport into another location. Meanwhile, Leotrina is inside Riley's memory, and she walks up to a place that looks like a cathedral. She peeps through the door, and sees Riley talking to a large creature with a skull face. The creature is the Demon King, and he asks Riley how it is that he was able to escape death's door. Riley replies that it is just as he sees it. The Demon King tells Riley that he might have been blessed as a warrior, but he's still a human, and humans die in the end. Riley tells him that he isn't blessed, but rather he is cursed. The Demon King acknowledges that there's indeed a curse upon him, and offers his condolences. Riley gets surprised that he's been consoled by the absolute evil, which is way more than he received from the saint. He starts to think perhaps he should have joined the Demon King, and maybe he would have had an earlier life. The Demon King tells him that it's not too late, but Riley refuses his offer. He claims he is a slave, and his will isn't up to him. Now, he has only one mission, and he must see it through, whether he fails or not. Riley points his sword at the Demon King, and the Demon King also takes a fight stance. However, the Demon King suggests taking care of the rat in the room, interrupting their battle. He drags out Leotrina with a power force and sends her flying into an ocean of memories. Due to that action, Riley realizes he has a lot in common with the Demon King, because he also doesn't entertain nuisances. In the real world, Leotrina keeps screaming her lungs out, and Riley, who is now awake, tries to get her to shut the hell up. While he struggles to keep her quiet, Nani and Sarah appear out of thin air. Riley immediately recognizes Nani, and just then does Sarah realize she's the one. Riley asks Nani to shut Leotrina up, and she casts a silence spell on her. Finally, the room becomes quiet, and Riley is at ease. He then starts to interrogate Sarah and Nani about what happened to him. Sarah explains the situation to Riley, and how worried they were about him. Just then, they hear Leotrina's guards coming from her, and Nani suggests they leave the room before those guards arrive. The soldiers arrive in the room and find only Leotrina in the room. The next day, one of Leotrina's guards comes into Riley's room to investigate his whereabouts during the incident with Leotrina. Riley claims he was in bed sick all day, and his maids tended to him. The guard asks about Sarah, who was seen lying outside unconscious, but Riley makes up an excuse that she was probably tired from practicing the Epheleta swordsmanship. The guard buys into Riley's lies, and he apologizes for disturbing him. Afterward, Sarah and Riley talk about the earlier incident with Leotrina. Sarah claims that she acted in a strange manner and threw her out the window. This made her wonder if she was possessed by a ghost, which will explain her blood-curdling screaming as well. In the banquet room, the guests seem to be talking all about the new beauty that has just walked in on them. The beauty queen turns out to be Nani in a sparkling gown, and she is swirling heads all around her. Due to her beauty, different guests start to approach her, each asking her for a different thing. Nani ends up spending all day rejecting their advances, and it soon reached a point that she got overwhelmed. She runs out of the party as a result, but she gets grabbed by the hand by a stranger. She tries to reject the stranger, but it turns out to be Riley. After Riley grabs her attention, the guests in the banquet start to hate on Riley, calling him the lazy son of the Epheleta family. Soon, the guests realize how close they seem and deduce that she's his rumored maid. It comes as a shock to them, because the maid doesn't have a huge scar on her face, and she's pretty. Riley finds their gossip annoying and drags Nani away from them. They come into a quiet garden, and Nani finally understands why Riley was always looking for a quiet place to lay his head. Just then, Riley says she has to ask her something, and she gets nervous. He proceeds to ask her what happened to Leotrina, which makes Nani realize she had no reason to be nervous initially. She tells him that she probably failed to accept his memories and ended up in a limbo as a result. Deep down, Nani knows she might have ended up like Leotrina, if not for the lady that helped her. After seeing some of Riley's memories again, she starts to cry. Riley asks her why she's crying all of a sudden, and she says something is in her eye. Riley then tells her not to say anything, like he made her cry, to his mother, and Nani starts to laugh. Riley suggests they put the Leotrina's saga behind them, since there's nothing they can do for her at the moment. Also, they've sprinkled Helione's embers just in case, and if anything changes, they'll know right away. Riley then asks about the artificial fairy issue, and Nani tells him they took care of it in another way. She then asks him if she looks too different, because Sarah didn't seem to recognize. She gets worried that Lady Iris and Ian might also not recognize her, but Riley calms her down. He tells her that she has really changed that much. Even if her face has changed a little, it wouldn't stop anyone from liking her. Meanwhile, in the desert lands, Kaval and his crew are looking for the saint. Just then, they pinpoint their location, and Kaval smirks. Back in Felizneon Castle, Sarah is excited because they now get to go home now that Nani's been cured, and Riley is fine. However, Nani decides to stay back because she wants to say goodbye to the doctor that treated her. Riley also decided to follow her, and Sarah is left looking like a lost duck. Riley tells Nani that his memory is all fuzzy, but he clearly knows there was another reason for their trip. Nani isn't surprised about this, since his soul has always struggled with the memories of his past. Soon, Riley remembers the reason, which is to get back at Kaval for taking his father's arm during the battle at the border. He tells Nani to locate Kaval with her eye, and she gets to work. She sees that Kaval is in the desert lands, but she gets a sharp pain in the eye and screams out. She starts to cry again, and Riley at this point is tired of her constant crying. Nani keeps the real reason for her tears from him, which is that she sees his painful memories from time to time. Afterward, she creates a portal leading to Kaval, and before they jump in, they assure Sarah that they'll be fine without her. In the desert lands, Frisia is seen walking with Nara. Soon, they get to a location, and Frisia asks Nara to watch her back for the next 5 hours. Nara gets worried because Frisia hasn't eaten in days, but she claims that she has fasted for longer. Frisia tells Nara that the revelation she received a few days back seemed menacing, so they have to be on high alert. The revelation told Frisia to be careful because the leg is seeking out the saint. After hearing those words, Nara takes them to heart and promises to look out for Frisia. Just then, Frisia cleanses their environment with a powerful magic, and this shocks Nara, who initially thought she was weak. Nara then thinks back at the revelation, but she doesn't do well with riddles. Suddenly, a leg belonging to Kaval appears behind her. Kaval seems happy to see his old friend, but Nara can't say the same. Meanwhile, Riley and Nani investigate their location, and Riley discovers that the whole place has been poisoned. This makes him realize that Epidemic might be somewhere close to them. He then asks Nani if she can still use her eye, but she claims it is still sore. They then decide to locate Kaval the old-fashioned way, and Nani casts a location spell. Afterward, the spell brings forth a path filled with footprints and blood. In the saint's location, Kaval and his crew have managed to subdue Nara and Frisia. They were about to head back to their lair, but Kaval wondered why Leotrina wasn't with them because he was sure he sent her a message a while back. While thinking about this, one of his men starts talking ignorantly about Frisia. Kaval hears this comment and calls them immature fools. He tells them that Frisia is the saint of the Solia Temple, and there is a big reward on her head. Also, the basilisk would come in handy later on, so she should be handled with care. Just then, Riley appears in front of them to confront them. He sees that Nara is still alive, and tells himself that she will be useful in finding other purple people, so he can't let her abductors slip away. Kaval recognizes Riley immediately and tells him not to get too mad about taking his father's arm, because all is fair in love and war. He continues to tease Riley, and soon he loses it. Riley released dark energy, causing everyone, including Kaval, not to move. Riley then counts the purple members, and after including Epidemic, there is one more he has to find. He then decides to cut down Kaval, but something strange stops him. Riley falls into a dark abyss, and in there, he talks to himself. He starts to wonder why he decides to pick up the sword again, even after vowing never to become anyone's hero again. He kneels face down at the feet of his other body, all dejected and filled with sorrow. His other body tells him picking up the sword is to avenge his father and also protect his family, since he couldn't do so in his past life. He then asks himself if he is so big of a coward that he runs away from everything he considers a nuisance. While Riley battled with his inner self, Kaval broke free from his dark energy. He tries to punch Riley, but his swing is dodged. He then grabbed his axe and smashed Riley with it, thinking he must have got to him this time. Unfortunately, Riley was able to dodge that too. Kaval then grabs him and asks if he is the person that has been pouring sand in their dreams all these while. Riley, who seems a bit out of it, mumbled to him to stop talking and fight him instead. Angrily, Kaval tries to hit Riley, but he hears Nani scream from a distance. He recognizes her as his maid and tells her it's too late to save her master. Shockingly, she teleports Riley to her location, leaving Kaval empty-handed. Nani then asks Riley why he isn't defending himself, and if it's related to his past life. She then tells him she's aware of how much he suffered in his past life, and the reason he decided not to take up a sword anymore. However, he has to follow his heart, so has to find a certain peace. She assures him that it wouldn't matter to her if he takes up the sword or not, because either way, she'll always be there to respect and support his decision. Her words bring peace to Riley's, and he almost lets his guard down. Suddenly, Kaval appears behind him, and Nani tells him to look out. Just then, Riley swiftly avoids Kaval's attack and cuts his hand off, just like he did his father. After getting a taste of his own medicine, Kaval crashes out and attacks Riley with full force. Their battle included several clashes of blades, and it appears as though they're evenly matched. However, Riley releases his dark energy once more, and Kaval tries to tank it with his Herculean strength. However, he was too slow, and Riley ended up finishing him off. Afterward, he moves to Nani and grills her on how she found out about his past life. She tries to avoid it and help Nara and Frisia, but Riley won't let her go. After a while, Nara and Frisia are fast asleep, and Nani explains her journey to Riley. She tells him about the goddess from his past, and how apologetic she was toward him. Riley still can't believe that the whole netherworld business was related to his past life, and now he has to go find the Holy Sword. He then asks Nani how he fell asleep in the first place, and her body language gives her away. She confesses that she put a sleep spell on him, and Riley flares up. He tells her that he will follow his heart and pinch her on the cheek, and Nani apologizes. She then asks him how they'll find the Holy Sword, and all the talk about his past life makes him crave red bean porridge. He then makes Nani promise to give him some when they get home. In the Ephialtes manor, Sarah is worried sick about Riley and Nani, and as a result, she continues to sweep the same spot over and over again. This catches Lady Iris's attention, and she tries to get Sarah to stop worrying. She tells her that they'll be fine, and just believe in them instead of worrying. She then mentions that she had to reassure Ian earlier, and Sarah asks about his whereabouts. Lady Iris then remembers she was supposed to give her something from Ian, and she goes to find it. The next day, Nara and Frisia wake up from their slumber, and they're so happy to see that Nani has been fully cured. Nara also notices that Riley's aura is now clearer and no longer murky, but he takes offense for calling his aura dirty. He then asks her about the number of purple people she's met, and she tells him they all add up to 4. However, Riley seems to be sure that they're 6, and after Leotrina, there's still one that is unaccounted for. Frisia then mentions that he has seen someone with long silver hair and a hood, acting suspicious recently. Riley says it might have been a noble lady, but Frisia says she did get that sense, because the person traveled unescorted. Frisia asks Riley why he's suddenly interested in purple people, and he says it wouldn't hurt to keep tabs on them. There's always a chance of the remaining 3 causing trouble, so they need to know who they're dealing with. Frisia asks if Riley is heading home right away or continuing on his journey, and he tells her he is going to visit the doctor that treated Nani before heading home. Frisia then offers to come along, but Riley turns her down. Nara tries to support Frisia and mentions her recent revelation. The revelation instructed Frisia to follow the child of the dark butterfly, which she thinks is Nani. Nani whispers to Riley that it might be related to the butterfly she saw in his dream, and he agrees. He then asks Nara what she thinks about it. Nara says she will go along with whatever Frisia says, but Frisia asks for Nani's opinion. However, Nani hesitates because of how the saint treated Riley in his past life. Then settled it that Frisia wouldn't come with them, and she should start working on purifying the desert lands instead. Frisia asks if she could join them afterwards, but Riley refuses. The next morning, Riley and Nara discuss how the poisoned lands of the desert might be related to the plague in the country. According to Nara, the cause of the plague is a moving person, and witnesses have seen this person beg others to kill them. Also, it has been seen heading toward Anthurium, and an evacuation order has been issued. Riley hopes his travel route doesn't involve Anthurium, and he asks Nani about it. Still in a deep sleep, Nani mumbles that Endal's cave is nowhere near the Anthurium, and just then does Riley feel the need to sleep as well. Afterward, he thinks back on Nani's advice to follow his heart, and he realizes she was right, because finally, he feels a sense of relief. The next day, Nara and Frisia head out to cleanse the desert, which will take about 3 days. Frisia then makes the last push to join them afterwards, but Riley shuts her down again. They go their separate ways, but Nani tells Riley that she's worried about Helione. She hasn't seen her in a long time, and she has never been gone that long. She's worried something might have happened to her, but Riley assures her that Endal will be able to figure something out, since he's her master. They then decide to head to his cave, and Nani teleports them. However, they arrive in a different location, and Nani isn't sure what has happened. Suddenly, she sees a bear and calls it the gatekeeper of Endal's cave. Riley thinks that it looks like a regular bear to him, but Nani claims that it helped her during her training. Both of them are close, and it might know something about why they are there. Nani runs toward the bear, but something seems strange about it. Nani wonders what's wrong with it, and it suddenly attacks her. Nani manages to block its attack, and she's quite sure it's because it doesn't recognize her. She then restrains it and tries to calm it down. Just then, the bear's eyes shift, and it calls out her name. Nani then asks about Endal and why they weren't teleported directly to his cave. The bear then pleads with her to free it first, and she does. It then explains that they were stopped by a magic barrier because a while back, Endal told it to make sure nothing goes close to the cave. He must have set up a magic barrier around the mountain to help with that. The bear further explains that it was trying to scare away some humans during its patrol, but they were very resilient, and that explains why it was in a bad rage and couldn't recognize Nani earlier. Nani informs Riley that there must be something dangerous ahead to warrant Endal to put up a magic barrier around the mountain. She tells the Guardian to remain there, while she and Riley go to the mountain on foot. She mentions that they have nothing to worry about because she's friends with all the Guardians, and all they have to do is focus on the path in front of them. Riley asks if there's another way besides walking, but Nani says if they recklessly teleport into the magical barrier, they can lose a body part. However, the journey to the cave shouldn't take more than an hour. 1 hour later, the two of them are still en route, and Riley feels like it's been 2 hours since he's been walking. Nani says it's just been an hour, but they haven't reached the cave because the Guardian couldn't recognize her now that she's got no scar. Riley says they were just on edge trying to follow Endal's orders because she hasn't changed that much. Suddenly, a group of jobless kids come out of nowhere and start to question their identity. Nani tells them she's a maid who serves the Red Dragon and asks them who they are. They reply that they are warriors, and they're there to defeat the Red Dragon, who threatens the peace of their village. Riley gets annoyed with the kids and just leaves them to Nani to deal with. Nani scolds the kids for having no evidence to prove that the Red Dragon was indeed disturbing the peace of their village, and the children start to panic. She then shows a bit of her powers and the kids get scared, thinking she's a human guardian. Nani tells them she's not a guardian, and advises them to leave the mountain. She then attempts to scare them a bit by sending a mild attack their way. To her surprise, one of the children deflects the attack. The girl apologizes to Nani and blames their youth and inexperience. The children ran away from the mountain, like Nani advised, but Nani seemed to recognize the sword style the little girl used earlier. Meanwhile, Riley moves quickly up the mountain, and he gets called by Nani. She lands in front of him after levitating in his direction. He asks her why she didn't tell him about her levitation prowess, but she says it just slipped her mind. As a punishment for that, he pinched her cheek, and she apologized. She then makes him levitate, but Riley just flaps around without moving. Riley asks why he isn't moving, and Nani tells him she hasn't granted him flight privileges. After a while, they flew up to the peak of the mountain, but they noticed it was shrouded up with lots of mist. Nani then suggests going to the cave, and Tylee can't wait to meet Endal, who has been too busy to come and welcome them. Upon getting to the cave, what they both see shocks them. They see Endal in his dragon form, all laid up and covered in poison. He claims that one of the purple people did it to him. Strangely, the first thing the purple person said was to end his life. This got him thinking how it is strange that people who take other people's lives find it difficult to do the same to themselves. However, Riley mocks Endal for getting himself beat up, and Endal tells them he needs to rest. They also find out that purification magic, which is Endal's specialty, didn't work on the poison. Just then, Helione appears and apologizes for disappearing without a word. However, her master's condition was too serious, and as they can see, her purification spells had no effect. As a result of this, she set up a barrier spell and told the Guardians to be on high alert. However, that didn't solve the real problem. Nani then thinks back, that the poison is made up of the same substance as the desert lands. Therefore, if they want to save Endal, they'll have to kidnap Frisia. Nani locates Frisia and Nara using her eye, but finds a shady person with them as well. Riley then asks if she has made any progress, and Nani is sure she'll be done in the next 3 days. Nani then asks why they can't just tell Frisia the truth, but Riley says that it will hurt his ego, and he wouldn't hear the end of it from her. He claims it's better to wait till she's done and kidnap her. Nani gets worried that Endal might not make it, but Riley assures her that he's been alive for thousands of years, and he wouldn't suddenly croak in 3 days. However, if she's that worried, she is welcome to use some time magic, but he will suggest they keep calm for the next 3 days. Meanwhile, the girl from the mountain was getting scolded by her grandma for going to the Dragon's Mountain with her friends. Her name is Errol, and her grandmother, who is blind, tells her to be careful not to get innocent people killed. Errol claims that they don't have much time left, and her grandmother hugs her. She asks Errol not to be patient, because destiny will make its will known to them soon. Errol asks her what will happen if the warrior never appears, and her grandmother replies that it means it was fated to be that way. After 3 days, Frisia has successfully made the desert sparkling again, and it was the best time to carry out the kidnapping. Nani gives Riley a mask, which apparently was used a lot in his memories when kidnapping people. Riley then suggests she does the job on her own, since she's a 7th Circle mage, and he'll probably slow her down. Nani accepts it and heads into the portal. Helione calls Riley pathetic for leaving Nani to do a dirty job alone. Riley tells her to wake him up when Nani's back, but suddenly, Nani arrives with ropes tied around Frisia. She claims that it was an easy job using magic to subdue Nara, and capturing Frisia wasn't hard either. Just then, Frisia starts to scream and threaten her abductors, but Nani already kept her from hearing their voices. The sight of it shocks Riley, who wonders how she could be that ruthless to her friend. Afterwards, Frisia puts her hands on Endal and deduces that the same poison in the desert has been inflicted on the dragon. She then asks them why they want her to heal a dragon. Riley replies that he is a friend, and they have no evil intention behind it. Frisia takes his word for it and prays for Endal. Luckily, her prayers are answered, and Endal becomes well again. Afterward, Nani offers to take Frisia out of there, but suddenly, Endal calls out Riley's name, halting Frisia in the process. As a reflex action, Riley smacks Endal in the face and claims that he must still be out of it because he's spewing nonsense. Angrily, Endal crashes out and shouts at Riley for smacking his face. He then claims that his maid, Nani, knows better than to smack him. Suddenly, he stops and realizes that he is well again. Sadly, he already spilled the beans, and Riley called him a stupid lizard. Afterward, Frisia starts to boast about her revelation, and Endal thanks her for helping him. She scolds Riley for kidnapping her, and also claims she now understands why he reacted differently to her prophecy about a dragon. It was because he is friends with one. Endal then stares at him with fire-blazing eyes, and Riley asks him what that look was all about. They soon start to argue with each other and hurl abuses in the process. Frisia asks Nani why she isn't stopping them, but she says she's already used to them bickering all the time. Riley then asks Endal what he's planning to do with Epidemic, and he says he's going to find and eliminate him. Riley feels it's not a good plan, because he might get poisoned, and this time he shouldn't come to him for help. Endal then asks Frisia for advice, and if she's actually seen the culprit. Frisia says she will see him according to her revelation, and that's why she's sticking with Riley and Nani. Nani also supports her, and Riley wonders whose side she's on. Frisia then tells him she only trusts both of them, and that's why she wants to stay with them. Endal makes a sassy comment about trusting his disciple, Nani, and not Riley. Riley decides to go to bed, and leaves them to figure out a solution to their problems. Meanwhile, in a cave, Epidemic is struggling to come out after a horrible fight with a dragon, in which fire burns his hand. He screams out that he wants to stop killing, but a voice calls his actions a nonsensical delusion. The voice claims that his powers are best suited for him, and the Great One said his powers are only seen once in a lifetime. However, Epidemic replies that he doesn't want those powers, and he's been saying this for the past 10 years. He then shouts that he doesn't care about their great dream. Just then, Libesla comes out and says he hates to force him, but time is of the essence, because they need their stench-spreading left leg, and he must live up to that name. He then drags him back into the cave, and claims he has to decimate a city, and kill a few dragons in the process. On the other hand, Riley wakes up and sees a couple of stars in the sky. He complains about it not being morning, yet attempts to go back to sleep. However, he discovers that he's in a different place entirely, and wonders where the hell he is. Before he could panic, Endal tells him that they're at the borderlands, where Epidemic is hiding, and they made the journey while he was fast asleep. Nani tells him she wanted them to make the decision together, but Endal pushed ahead with his. Riley thinks that he should have let him die while he had the chance. Just then, they both get into it and start bickering like sisters again. Frisia interrupts and tells them she has finished interrogating the cave, and it's the same person as the one carrying the pestilence. They then decide to enter the cave and catch him while he's still recuperating. Inside the cave, Endal tells them about Epidemic's resilience during their clash. He struck him with gusts of wind to blast his head off, and then combined it with ice to break his body apart. Finally, he set him ablaze to reduce him to ashes, but somehow he survived it all. Strange thing was, when he looked in his eyes, he had no will to fight, but he just kept asking to be killed. Every time he left him alone to die, he came back to life, exuding more pestilence. This made him conclude that his powers aren't enough to kill him, but maybe the divine power can. Frisia then asks him to describe what he looks like, and he does. Speaking of the devil, Epidemic appears right in front of them, exuding his pestilence and horrible stench. After seeing him, Frisia begins purifying him, but is a lot stronger than the poison in the desert. However, Frisia believes it is not beyond her power, and she tells Endal to carry her out of the way once Epidemic rushes at her. Immediately, Epidemic runs toward her, and Endal responds by taking her out of harm's way. Just then, Frisia continues her purification process on Epidemic, and he lets out a scream like he's being exorcised. Riley then remembers a similar situation from his past, a person known as Breath of Affliction. In Riley's previous life, mana didn't exist, but other powers did. In order to defeat the demon that threatened them, humans developed superpowers, but there was one that couldn't control the power he possessed. The more he used his powers, the more it eroded him from within, leaving him with unbearable pain. Once he got into a frenzied state, he was impossible to kill, and there was only one way to stop him from becoming a limitless catastrophe. Riley tells Frisia to infuse her divine powers into his sword, and even though it will nullify the spells she just cast on Epidemic, Endal suggests they give it a try. Endal holds him up with chains, while Frisia infuses Riley's sword with divine powers. Riley then throws the sword into Epidemic's throat, but it didn't seem to do much. They then realize that someone must have forced those powers into him on purpose. Riley suggests they retreat immediately because the divine powers won't be enough to stop him. In a flash, they rushed into the portal created by Nani because there's only one way to kill Epidemic. It is just as the butterfly said, Riley has to find the holy sword. While they tried to escape, Epidemic followed them, but Riley threw a pillow at him, calling him a pain in the ass. The pillow managed to push Epidemic back while they escaped through the portal. After their escape, Riley educates the others about the Breath of Affliction. He explains that the pestilence flows from the victim uncontrollably, and there seems to be no limit to the number of times he can come back to life. Frisia wonders why Ironessa neglected to reveal that fact to her, and Endal asks Riley what their next step is. Riley tells him to give him some time to think, but deep down, he knows the solution. However, it is something that he really doesn't want to do. Endal then decides to check with his people and figure out a way. He claims that his fellow dragons will stall Epidemic long enough to trap him in that hole. He then wishes they stay alive and meet again before disappearing into thin air. Nani then comes to Riley and tells him she's also aware of the solution because of his memories. Since the Breath of Affliction has made Epidemic immune to normal swords, they have to find the one carrying the holy sword. Meanwhile, Frisia is trying to eavesdrop on their conversation, but she can't make up what they're saying. She then suddenly remembers Nara and how she just ghosted her. They then decide to go back to the desert lands to look for her. In the desert lands, Nara was so happy to see Frisia again that she started to weep. Nani and Riley decide to leave them to their little reunion, but Nara calls Riley. She asks him if he has seen Ian, because he's been looking all over for her. They then realize that the shady person they saw while locating Frisia must have been Ian. However, Nara directed him to Rainfield because she thought Nani's doctor was there. Riley decides they go straight to Rainfield, but Nani suggests they track him instead. Due to the cold weather in Rainfield, Riley agrees with tracking him and asks Nara and Frisia to join them. In the village close to the Dragon Mountain, Errol talks to a lady, and she warns her not to take anyone to the mountains anymore, because it's dangerous. However, Errol refuses to heed her warning, and she insists that she won't give up. She thinks that she doesn't care about destiny, only her grandma who's running out of time. As a result, she will find the warrior that will save them all. Just then, she sees a person wearing a hood coming toward her. She stops the person and tells show her some skills with a sword if they wish to enter her village. The stranger promises not to hold back on her because she's a little girl, but Errol laughs in his face, calling his bluff. The villagers see Errol arguing with the stranger and conclude she's about to get scolded by her grandmother yet again. The stranger draws a sword and begins to fight with Errol. Surprisingly, the stranger sees that Errol is no joke, and she's indeed good with the sword. She not only parries his attacks, she also counters them. He then asks her who she is, and she tells him her name is Errol, with no last name. The stranger then unveils his hood, and he turns out to be Ryan. He initially wanted to tell her his last name, but he changed his mind, and told her he doesn't have a last name, just like her.